To the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great, great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and even more than us, because as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very, very good morning to you. Welcome to the show. It's 2 minutes past 10 o'clock. This is Talk, the home of common sense. And whether you're listening on DAB+ radio, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, it is fabulous to have your company. Lots coming up. I mean, it's a huge, huge, huge news day. Whether any of it will actually lead to, anything useful happening that we're going to be happy about, I'm intrigued to know. But coming up in this hour, Keir Starmer has been hosting more than 40 countries in London for a border security summit today, as he pledges to lead a global crackdown on illegal immigration. It never ends, doesn't it? But this is all about everyone working together, going all the way back to the countries where people are actually coming from, or the countries they cross, and all working together. The PM is urging nations to unite behind a new approach to smash smuggling gangs, with greater intelligence sharing amid record levels of channel migrants, which, by the way, even though we've actually seen the highest number of channel migrants in the January, February, March period in any year, Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, says it's just down to the weather. But ain't that the point, that actually they're not in control of this, and it's entirely down to the smuggling gangs and the weather and nothing that they do. And until you do actually tackle the issue of the pull factor, they're still going to want to come here, are they not? Plus, we're going to be talking about Two-Tier Tuesday, which comes in tomorrow. Now, added to that, news story, ethnic minority criminal suspects have been given priority for bail by judges under new two-tier justice guidance. These were drawn up by the Ministry of Justice. This comes as the Justice Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, plans to change the law to override the two-tier justice guidelines drawn up by the Sentencing Council, supposedly an independent quango, come into force tomorrow, which could see pre-sentencing reports and therefore very likely lower sentences for people who come from various religious, ethnic, cultural, whatever they are, communities. Oh, yes, and people claiming to be trans. But there we are. Plus, Donald Trump says he is, I'm going to slightly misquote here, peed off with Vladimir Putin. He's threatened new sanctions against Russia, effectively secondary sanctions. Basically, if you buy Russian oil, hello, India and China, you're going to face huge sanctions on everything you sell to the States. Oh, might that actually move them to pay attention to that issue? This after the Russian dictator demanded that Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine was replaced with a transitional government as the price for peace talks in Ukraine. Oh, do you think Donald Trump is finally waking up to the fact that you can't trust Putin? Absolutely fascinating. Anyway, I can't wait to hear your thoughts on all of that. Great also to welcome commentator Sam Armstrong Armstrong to the show. Very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Just as we came on air, to say some absolutely smashing breaking news coming in from France. Marine Le Pen, the leader of the National Rally Party, of course, which is the largest party in the parliamentary elections, the snap elections called by Emmanuel Macron last year. She has been found guilty of misusing public funds. She faces a possible ban from standing for French political office. She and 8 MEPs from her party were found guilty of embezzling EU funds to pay party staff in a Paris court in the last few moments. Now, sentencing expected later today. The prosecution have asked for Le Pen to be given a 5-year jail sentence, but also, crucially, an immediate 5-year ban on holding public office. This crucially would prevent her from running to replace Emmanuel Macron in 2027 in the next presidential elections. Now, Emmanuel Macron would not be standing in that, but she has seen an increase, a really very solid increase in her votes in the number of elections she has stood in over the years. Very likely that she could win that presidential election, depending on who she is running off against, if she gets into presidential runoff, as she has the last couple of times. So we could see Marine Le Pen of National Rally banned from standing. Now, of course, there is another key figure in her party who could possibly be a replacement, but this would be an astounding situation. If that does happen, I have to say, I can see things, I think on a technical term there, Sam Armstrong, kicking off in France, given how well National Rally has been doing, and particularly among young people in France. Just before we get to what's going on here, what do you make of this? Bearing in mind, by the way, that Marine Le Pen has become such a strong figure due to issues like the smuggling, the mass uncontrolled illegal and legal immigration in France, massive big issues, the economy, all of the things that are affecting us are affecting France, many other countries too, and that's why she has been so popular.
Yeah, well, the first thing is to say that there are really quite complicated rules about what you can and can't spend money on as an MEP, and the suggestion here is that she's taken money as an MEP, spent it in a way that was more party political than parliamentary, and that's a technical thing about which we or anybody else commentating on this today frankly knows very little, and it's just one of those complicated things. She could be in the right, she could be in the wrong. This court says she's in the wrong. However, all that having been said, this feels, this smells, this sounds an awful lot like what Donald Trump went through in America in the 2 years running up to his election as president. Time after time, convenient cases brought just at the right moment that would rule him out as a candidate to be president. And it didn't work in America. My suspicion is, if she can shake off any formal legal ban, it won't work in France. And Marine Le Pen's supporters will turn around and look at this in precisely the same way that Republicans and a good deal of non-Republicans looked at the way that Democrats kept going after Donald Trump through the courts time and time again and say, do you know what? Stuff this, we're going to vote for her in even bigger numbers. Well,
crucially, of course, in America, Donald Trump could have run even from prison as the president. He could have served from prison as the president. Actually, he could have pardoned himself. So, you know, you're in different territory there where she couldn't actually run. I suppose she could put forward Jordan Bardella. He's been a very popular figure, and he's the leader of the party, I think, in the National Assembly. So that would be an interesting development. But we'll find out. I mean, as soon as we get that result in terms of that sentencing, we'll bring it to you. But I wonder if there's a sentencing report, one of those pre-sentencing reports they get. I wonder if, I mean, under our laws, of course, she'd do very badly, wouldn't she? Because she's not from an ethnic minority.
No, but she's a woman.
She's a woman. Oh, yeah, that's it. So she would do better under our sentencing laws.
You do fine, Julia.
I do okay.
It's just white, straight men like me that
yeah, you'd be monstered, wouldn't you? So we'll get on back. I'd love to hear your reaction on Marine Le Pen, because I have to say, I don't see a lot of Marine Le Pen supporters. I don't see people on any side taking this well. But bearing in mind, of course, if it was someone on the left who this was happening to, and if that personal leader on the left was banned from standing, and there were riots on the streets, as there often have been left-wing riots on the streets in France, you know how the BBC and everyone would report it. It's going to be very different how they report it. It's going to be Southport riots scenario, isn't it? This time round, if it is trouble on the streets. So we'll wait and see what happens there. Do get your thoughts in on there, but I particularly also want to hear from you. Again, one of the biggest issues going on in French politics is one of the biggest issues in British politics. politics, which is uncontrolled mass illegal immigration as well as mass legal immigration. But Keir Starmer has been hosting an international border security summit today, some representatives from 40 countries attending. He says he's going to smash the smuggling gangs, keeps talking about that. Want to know, will his global crackdown work? Tell us why it will, tell us why it won't. Give us a call 0344 499 1000, text the word talk to 87222, text us, get in touch on X at Talk TV, sorry. Calls are charged at the national rate, text cost £1, standard network rate message. But I say, love to hear your thoughts from Marina Penn or anything else that we are talking about today. But Sam, let's just go to that summit. I mean, yet another summit. I mean, God, that man loves a summit. But this is such a mainstream, whether it's Labour or Tory party thing, which let's have another summit. Let's get more people in the room to talk about what we can do. Everyone knows what you need to do. You need to stop people travelling from their countries in the first place, getting on the boats, for us, getting on the boats at Calais. And then when they get here, you need them to be returned immediately or have such a miserable existence here or turn somewhere else that they wouldn't bother to come. You need to lose the pull factor. Fundamentally, the pull factor is the thing we have most control of. The push factor is a lot of these people coming from basket case countries, whether it's economically, politically, civil war, famine, what dictators, whatever it is. There is always going to be the push factor. It's the pull factor that we've got control of. And there still seems to me to be no real urge to do that. Yvette Cooper blaming the weather for the record number of small boat crossings. Hilariously, the Prime Minister has already said this morning that he believes. He said it's beginning to bear fruit. He said their policies. I mean, you've had the highest number of people coming across the Channel in the first 3 months of the year ever. But it's not beginning to bear fruit, is it? No, like basic numbers. We are 43% higher in terms of number of illegal migrants getting to the UK than we were this time last year. It's the highest year ever. And since the election, and if you run it from the election onwards, crossing numbers are up 30%. So Keir Starmer's dividend is 30% more illegal migrants staying in hotels on the streets of Great Britain. There is no debate. There is no room for manoeuvre around that. Those are the realities on the ground. Yeah. And there is a clear reason for that. We did have something, a smidgen, an iota of a deterrent in the Rwanda scheme. It wasn't working yet, but it could have worked in the future. And some migrants were scared of that. Do you remember we saw some of them running off to Ireland where they thought they would be safe from that? Now, the Tories... Can I just say, tee-hee-hee? Given how Ireland tried to stuff us on Brexit. Oh, well. Quite right, too. Sorry, but, But the Tories were pathetic and weak and just lackadaisical in how they were getting that policy to work. And they wouldn't do what Rishi Sunak, I think, has now conceded that he had to do, which was to pull us out of the ECHR, to stop our human rights laws blocking this and to get that scheme working. But Keir Starmer, his first act in government is to cancel the only deterrent that we had. So is it any wonder that more and more migrants, and he can fly around the world, he can shake as many hands as he likes, but unless and until it is the reality that if you turn up on the shores of Dover, you're going back across the Channel to France, people will just keep coming. And why? Why wouldn't they? We are a shining city on a hill. People around the world want to come here because they see us as a soft touch. They see that you're going to get put up in a hotel. They see you're going to get benefits or jobs or whatever. What's not to like? Unless you do something about the fundamental factor, it's just going to keep happening. I mean, my thing is, again, I still come back to Rwanda and that ridiculous thing. Again, in principle, the elected government of this country will have to make laws on these things without being blocked by activist judges who all meet together for the same Islington dinner parties. However, Rwanda was not what Australia did. In Australia, when they had the boat problem, they literally stopped people from ever touching foot on Australian territory. No one ever made it. That was it, end of. Once you got people here, and the thing is, you might think, they're living in hostels, they're only on £30 a day. What, after the room and food and how do you think they were living when they were on the beaches of Calais? They were living in makeshift tents being cleared by the police. How do you think they were living back in their home country? What we offer is so much better than the life they have. We may not be feeling much love and admiration for our country right now, but relative to much of the rest of the world, we're still doing okay.
And it's balderdash. Every single one of these migrants is making up the ranks, the cadres of delivery drivers for all of the food takeaways that people, especially in London, love. They all allow you, all of these apps allow you to set 5 sub-drivers that you certify illegally to work in this country. It's a total scheme. It's a total con. Everybody knows what's going on. And these migrants are raking in hundreds, if not thousands of pounds a week from servicing these apps. People in London are very happy that they no longer have to go out and get their shopping because they can summon a migrant to do it on their moped for them. And all the while, the real people that are suffering are working class people in this country that are having to pay the taxes to put these people up and are having their wages undermined by tens upon thousands.
And that is the absolute crucial thing. At the end of the day, the people in charge, the people who give a load of money to political parties, are very, very happy to have a lot of people in this country who are willing to work for below the minimum wage. Bearing in mind, on Tuesday and over the next few days up to April the 6th, we've got massive tax changes coming in, national insurance going up. We've also got minimum wage going up. Well, how nice if you don't have to pay the minimum wage because someone can't complain to any authority because they're here illegally. That's what happens. It's what's been happening in America with workers from Mexico. And again, who benefits from that? Well, we get cheap. Isn't it great? We get cheap prices. Well, we don't get cheap prices because we just pay more in tax to fund these people. And even when they're legal, we're paying for their housing benefit and everything else. It's a system that only works for the super rich who run businesses who exploit this. But for the business people and vast majority of business people who don't exploit this and who treat their workers well and do everything legally, it hurts them because they're not competing on a level playing field. I mean, this has massive ramifications across the whole of society, does it not? Also, we've learned the last day or so that the number of migrants overstaying their visas account for over 1/3 of asylum claims. So these people are not just people who are just arriving in the back of a lorry or on an overcrowded dinghy. They're people who've arrived here on a student visa, been here for a few years, and then miraculously, around the time that their student visa is up and they have to go home, turns out that I'm a political asylum seeker of some sort, or they're on a work visa, and suddenly they're claiming this. I mean, this is just simply abject nonsense, and this is what we're dealing with. But I was amazed. It was Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, who actually put some of these figures out. But I mean, it's just untenable that this continues, isn't it? But let's also talk about another big issue. There's so much more I want to talk about, including Prince Harry and Centre Barley, his charity, but we'll get to that in the next half hour or so. But we've got 2 aspects of 2-tier sentencing. Now, the Justice Secretary, Robert Jenrick, he was on Mike's show earlier today, of course, and he was the one who pointed out a couple of weeks ago that we've got 2-tier justice coming up as of tomorrow, 2-tier Tuesday, when the sentencing guidelines from the Sentencing Council, an independent quango, basically come into force, which means that judges, magistrates could be told to get pre-sentencing reports as sort of a matter of default, but only for certain people. Basically, if you're an ethnic minority, a religious minority, a community minority, I don't know what that is, by the way, you're claiming to be trans. Let's not say trans people, you're claiming to be trans. Magnificent number of of men who are accused of sex crimes suddenly decide that they're trans around the time that they're arrested for those crimes, interestingly. Now, if you get a pre-sentencing report, it's largely about mitigating factors. It's about, I've had a sad childhood and all this and all that, so you're more likely to get a leaner sentence. So this is basically a policy which will mean that if you're white, particularly if you're a man, particularly if you're straight and you're Christian or an atheist, basically you're going to get the tougher sentences almost by default. Clearly 2-tier sentencing. Now, interestingly, Shabana Mahmood, the Justice Secretary, who pointed out as a Muslim woman herself she opposed this, she was opposed to this. It turns out, her advisors were in the meetings when this was all agreed. This has been going on for a long time. The Tories have been talking about this because basically these quangos operate along with the civil service in a world of their own. She has been trying to persuade the Sentencing Guidelines Council to change this. They've basically gone, no, we're independent. There's now talk about changing the law within the next few days, which would get, of course, Tory support and Labour support to stop this from happening. But we also now know that ethnic minority suspects are given priority for bail under 2-tier justice. Why on earth does the colour of anyone's skin or their religion or any other factor have any bearing on whether or not someone should get bail or whether or not someone should be sent to prison for a long time?
What? Because for a big part of the activist class that run this country, being white is a problem. We talk about the problematic nature of whiteness. We talk about how we need to deal with that, to tackle whiteness. People in this country are told that they can be and are encouraged to be, and it is virtuous to be, racist towards you, towards me, towards anybody that has the misfortune of having been born with white skin. These are people that started hating our country. They went on to hating our institutions. And having got rid of them, they just hate the people that live there. And the worst thing of it all is who pays for these people, who subsidises them, who keeps them in the lifestyle to which they become accustomed at fancy North London dinner parties. You do. I do. Everybody listening to this station does. Yep. It's disgusting, it's disgraceful, and it's gone on for too long. And now we have a situation in which everybody has agreed, this is wrong, this is outrageous. The Justice Secretary of Great Britain and Northern Ireland has said this needs to stop. These people have put two fingers up to her. They've said, no, we're not doing it.
Unelected, unaccountable sentencing council.
Half the people on this council are precisely the sorts of people
you look down their bios, they're exactly the people you think they'll be. Put it that way.
But the Justice Secretary of this country, the person who is by law, statutorily, in charge of enforcing equal justice for everyone before the rule of law, is powerless, impotent, totally devoid of the capacity to do anything about it.
We understand how judges and magistrates need to act independently on independent, on individual cases. Of course, I don't want the Justice Secretary saying, if Sam Armstrong's convicted of a crime, it's only a matter of time. This is the sentence he should have, as opposed to someone else getting convicted of the same crime. That's not what we're talking about. But the sentencing guidelines, by definition, should be set by democratically elected, accountable people in Parliament. I may not agree with a lot of the MPs, but they're democratically elected, and that should be the fundamental basis of it. The fact they've got themselves into this mess, by the way, the fact that a lot of this stuff did happen under the Tory lot as well, it's a fair criticism. But this just is so untenable, and two-tier Keir is bad enough already when we saw what happened with Southport. We've seen cases again exposed over the last few days, showing clear difference in policy. And it's very, very interesting. Look, there are clearly backgrounds to people's, criminal activity. If you grew up in a nice home with mum and dad there and both working, the odds of you getting involved in crime is pretty darn low. And yet a lot of kids are coming from a very bad situation. If your dad was a drug dealer in and out of jail, and mum's a heroin addict as well, I think your chances of going on the straight and narrow are pretty hard. And I think we need to have some empathy and give you help. I really do believe that. But I don't think that's got to do with someone's race or someone's religion. I find that utterly, utterly perplexing, and certainly not whether or not you're a man and you choose to wear a dress. But there we are. Love to hear your thoughts on all of this. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Because the extraordinary thing about this is, if you did get convicted of a crime, if you were charged with a crime, this would affect you, whatever your race, religion, creed, community, minority. I don't know what this is, but apparently it is a thing in our sentencing guidelines. And we just need to stop this because, frankly, it's against every principle of justice as far as I'm concerned. But I'd love to hear from you. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Do get in touch about this global crackdown on the smuggling gangs, about two-tier justice. I know we'll talk about that a lot tomorrow when it comes into force. But also Marine Le Pen, National Rally leader, found guilty in an embezzlement case. Part of the punishment could be not just a 5-year jail sentence, which is what the prosecution are asking for, but also preventing her for 5 years from standing for public office. That would mean she couldn't run in the next presidential election in France in 2027. How will her supporters react? Your thoughts on that? Give us a call. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
I was on the 24th, 25th floor, and one of the cleaners of the building said, "Run now, go, go, go." And, you know, debris was falling. It was very scary. I mean, when you're at that height, you actually start to think, am I going to get down in time? So it was very scary. I ran to the bottom, to the ground floor, like thousands of others. And it was just such a strange thing to happen, because these things happen in the region, in other countries, in other states, other territories. I mean, if you look at Taiwan, Hong Kong, in China, earthquakes are fairly common, but in Thailand, certainly Bangkok, it's not.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very, very good morning to you. 10:26 is the time. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Sam Armstrong also with me. He's on fire this Monday morning, folks, on fire. Let's get to your calls coming in and your messages coming in thick and fast, particularly on migration. Of course, we've got another summit. Another bunch of people talking about smashing the smuggling gangs. This time we're going to go back to the sources and where people are coming from and stopping them crossing the borders. We're going to be giving some of our taxpayers' money to help the prosecution in other countries. I don't know why they can't afford to do this themselves. But will Keir Starmer's global crackdown work? I think I can predict some of your answers, but do get in touch. I'd love to hear your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Some of the texts and tweets coming in. Craig says, of course it won't work. It's just meaningless propaganda, all hot air. Labour could stop the boats today if they wanted to, as indeed the Tories could have if they wanted to. Christian said, I thought he had a plan to smash the gangs 9 months ago. Another lie. Ian says, no, it cannot work unless Britain leaves the ECHR and we deport all illegals, stop giving them benefits and luxury hotel accommodation. Also, Labour simply do not want to stop illegal immigration. They really love them. Daniel says, rather than a summit, why not just arrest the gang leaders today? Sarah says, cut the benefits, start deporting, make it so if you land here illegally, you get nothing and you're barred from ever applying to get to the UK again and you're deported. It's simple. It would stop within a couple of weeks. Indeed it would. Stephen says no, because the majority of the men crossing don't need the help from smuggling gangs as it's become so easy. Let's go to Herbie, who's on the line in Harrow. Very good morning to you, Herbie. What do you make of this plan?
Good morning, Julie. Well, here we go again. I mean, to say, if the government says today, right, there's no more benefits, we're not the freebie country of the world, we are stopping all this stupidity of housing you, feeding you, giving you all these freebies at the cost of the British taxpayers, and I blame France for allowing them to accommodate and accumulate in Calais to come over it. It's their problem that they should be sorted.
Well, exactly. And again, lots of those people wouldn't be coming to northern France or to France at all if they weren't planning to cross. Here's the thing, though. If we didn't offer the freebies, a lot of these people, they are working illegally. They're working in the car washes. They're working, under minimum wage. There's a load of this stuff going on. So even if they weren't getting the freebie accommodation, they'd still be able to support themselves. You need to have them either basically imprisoned here, interned here in some way, or, and again, I don't see how even our own courts would allow that for years at a time, or you have to ship them out. Those are the only two options as far as I can tell.
Yeah, but Julie, the problem is that the pressure on the NHS, the pressure on schooling, on transport, on housing is so immense that the government can't see it. It's creating more problems because they're coming over daily. Yeah. And the more that come over, the more pressure they put on the system that we can't cope with. We're all suffering because of the amount of money we don't have to spend that we seem to be able to give to them.
Yeah, and also the impact on many towns and villages and cities in terms of this large number of young men, often from cultures completely alien to ours, particularly in terms of attitudes to crime, attitudes particularly to violence, and women and sexual violence. I mean, every young woman I know, teenagers and women in their 20s who I speak to, and I speak to a lot of people much younger than me, the women talk about the harassment they're getting routinely on the streets now in London. I know it's happening in other cities and towns as well.
Yeah, but the problem is I've got a granddaughter and I really fear for her future. Yeah. I really, really do.
Yeah, but but we have this conversation, we're just bigots. Currently, we're just making it up.
No. The problem is that the government can't see what it's doing to our society, what it's doing to our system. They're blind to they got their head in the sand and they're not doing a damn thing about anything. All they're doing is making our life a misery and intolerable.
But have another summit. That'll solve it.
Do you know, Julia, I cannot believe that we've got a government that really doesn't care about the British people anymore.
Yeah, but that said, the Tories talked a good game, but I'm not sure they I mean, again, I'm a believer in you judge people on what they actually do rather than just what they say. And if you don't do the stuff you said you're going to do, I have to assume you were lying to me. I'm sorry, that's how I think of these things. Herbie, thank you so much for your call. Appreciate that. It's interesting, Sam Armstrong, just another summit. But later today, Keir Starmer, he's already left that summit, smashing the gangs. He's hosting a sort of a big meeting with various different organisations about the Netflix series Adolescence. Great series, really enjoyed it. It wasn't at all what I expected it to be. I don't know why people are making such a big deal of it. It's a good piece of film. I didn't learn anything new. It was rather, I mean, when they talk about, young violence in these cases, I mean, it's rather misleading. There aren't actually lots of young men who are growing up in a lovely home with mum and dad at home and both in work in a loving family who are going around stabbing girls. I'm sorry if I've ruined the plot, everybody. That really isn't, and particularly white boys, interestingly, if you actually look at the crime stats, it's rather unrepresentative. But the idea that he needs to host a summit or any sort of meeting about something that was on the telly, I mean, there's nothing new in that document. Anyone who's been paying attention, and someone who is a director of public prosecutions should probably know about these things, wouldn't be surprised by anything at all in that meeting. Why is a sensible government? Why is a government that's supposed to be doing having a meeting about a telly show?
Look, this is not a functioning country anymore. I've literally come to this conclusion. We live in a circus, right, in which our country is actually governed by people you've never heard of, that sit in offices you don't know where they are, doing things that you've got no idea they're doing, and presiding over the steady deterioration of the living standards, of wages, of our economy, of everything. And from time to time, we are provided with entertainment, and it's literally just entertainment, from politicians pretending that they run the country, who pop up, they hold so-called summits, put out press releases and all the rest of it to make it look like they're doing something. They're not. We know they're not. They know they're not.
We live with the reality.
It's just a farce.
I know, it really is. It's so insulting. It really is. There are lots more calls coming in. I promise to get some more calls in the next hour. We're going to take a little moment now to find out how you could be in with a chance of winning Oasis tickets at Wembley this summer, plus £10,000.
How'd you fancy winning tickets to the hottest gig of the century? Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to bag yourself a pair of tickets to Oasis at Wembley this summer. Plus, we're giving away a whopping 10 grand and putting you up for the weekend in a London hotel. All you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 and you're in the draw. Alternatively, you can enter by post. Once again, all you need to do is text the word prize to 83338 or you can enter by post. Good luck.
18 plus UK excluding Northern Ireland. Enter by text for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on the 7th of April 2025. Or post your name and number to Oasis Competition, PO Box 3190. Colchester CO2 8GP to arrive by 5 p.m. on the 10th of April 2025. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
This is a News Broadcasting Network promotion.
Very good luck with that competition, folks. It's 10:34. Let's take a quick break. Up next, going to be talking about migration. We're going to also be talking about Donald Trump lashing out at Vladimir Putin. That's all coming up. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 10:36 is the time. Let's welcome Danny Shaw to the show. He's a Home Affairs commentator and a former advisor to Yvette Cooper before he was Home Secretary. She was Home Secretary even. A very good morning to you, Danny.
Morning, Julia. Hi.
I'd like to see you Home Secretary. That'd be quite a good thing to watch. I hope you'd still come on the show. Let's talk about this global crackdown on people smugglers. This big summit that's being held by Keir Starmer. Is this going to, as a question I'm putting to our audience today, is this going to actually work?
Look, this is all part of efforts to try and clamp down on smuggling gangs and the small boat crossings, and by itself. And the measures here, I don't think they are going to do the job. I think they may help. I certainly really welcome the injection of money for sort of international Crown Prosecution Service, so prosecutors overseas, because the key people overseas are actually the prosecutors in foreign countries, because they work to a different system than we work here. They're the ones who can begin an investigation into people smuggling gangs. Here, it's the police who do it. Overseas, the prosecuting authorities have to start it.
But I don't know why we should be helping fund some of these. I mean, some of our money that's going to this is, I mean, it's bad enough us having to help the French police not very well a lot of the time for years, the French beaches to stop people getting into these big dinghies. But now we're having to help fund prosecutions. I mean, surely these countries can afford to do it themselves.
It's about having our own staff, our own liaison officers there who can work with people and convince them to start the investigations and to share intelligence and to give them some information. They may provide some information in return. It's about that soft power thing, Julia. Look, I think these are helpful measures, right? And I think it's nothing wrong with having a summit, bringing all the countries together to try and get people to work together.
I get that,
it's not going to stop the problem.
Well, exactly,
itself.
Because we're talking about dealing with the push factor, like those, well, let's stop them selling the dinghies. Let's go after the people making the dinghies. Let's go after the people, taking the money to put them on the. Okay, let's go after the people who are getting them to travel across the country. Let's go after the people who are advertising on TikTok and Snapchat or whatever how to go about moving from Vietnam or Afghanistan or wherever to get to the UK. I mean, all of that's all very well. If you don't get rid of the pull factor of once you get here, odds are you'll never leave, and you'll get given accommodation. You'll probably get asylum at some point anyway, or leave to stay, and you'll be fine, and you can work in the free in the black market. I mean, unless you get rid of that pull factor, you're never going to stop it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. There has to be a deterrent, and the deterrent I've always argued is that if people come here on a small boat, they're returned to France within 48 hours. That will stop it, and that requires cooperation between us, France, and the EU. It requires a deal. And that's the silver bullet. All the other measures will help. They will make it more difficult for the gangs. They may disrupt some of the activity. They may bring the numbers down a bit. But unless you get that deterrent that says that route is completely unviable, there's no point even trying it, because you'll go back.
But then the French say, well, we don't want these people. They're quite happy. By all accounts, we've got, the people who are getting into these boats are being told, just get out that far, and then, then the authorities in Britain will come to you. The French boats will come over and go, right, we'll stay with you until you get into international waters or British waters, and then you're not our problem. We know what they're doing, and we're paying them not to do it, and they're still doing it. I thought it was fascinating that Yvette Cooper, your old boss, made the point, and it's totally true, it is perfectly fair, that weather is a big factor in terms of the number of people who come across, so, whether it's winter or summer, and we've had particularly calm conditions on the sea and clement weather over the Channel, and so we've seen the biggest number of people coming in the first 3 months of any year ever on that route. But I thought really, she was kind of justifying, look, it's not our fault, it's the weather, don't read anything into this. But I thought actually she betrayed the fact that the lack of, the absolute powerlessness, that whether you're a Tory government or a Labour government, when you still have the judicial arrangements we have and the ECHR and the activist judges, that actually they do have no power over this. The number of people who are going to come are the number of people who are going to come, and it's down to the weather more than down to any government policy.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think that was really a particularly helpful thing to say, even though that may be the reason, because as you suggest, it gives the the sign that this is something that's out of our control. And what you should be focusing on is the efforts that the government are going to try and bear down on this. And they have been doing a lot of stuff, a lot of measures. Border Security Command, again, I think is a good innovation to try and grip the problem. But it's those deals with the European countries. Just coming back to that, we can give something in return to the French and to the EU. We can give them intelligence. We can give them cooperation to help them deal with the problem as well. And if they, in return, can have some kind of returns deal, that is the thing that they should be aiming for. It doesn't seem that ministers want to talk about it.
These are supposed to be our friends. Keir Starmer's supposed to have this wonderful, warm relationship with, little bromance with Emmanuel Macron. The whole issue for all these years has been that Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss and whoever else was Prime Minister in the last few years, they didn't get on with the French. They didn't work nicely with them. As soon as Labour got in, 9 months ago, they were supposed to deal with this, but they're still not dealing with it.
Well, they are working better together. You can see that.
Which is why we've had a record number of people turn up in the first 3 months of this year.
You can see they're working better together, but that's not enough.
I don't care if they just shout rude words at each other, if they actually stop the boats.
Well, I think we're going to see at the end of this year, Julia, if the numbers are not down significantly from where they were before, then I think they have a real problem, frankly. They can make progress in other areas, processing asylum claims, increasing returns. That's really good news. That's good. Get the asylum system functioning better. But yeah, ultimately, I would say the end of this year, if those numbers are not down significantly, they've got a real problem.
And at the end of the day, even though they have improved the number of returns, there was abject haplessness on the part of the Tories in the last few years. It's still a drop in the ocean compared to the number we've got. Let's also talk about police issues. Of course, that comes under the Home Secretary's purview as well. And some extraordinary cases we've heard about in the last few days in terms of police being incredibly heavy-handed. 6 police officers turning up at the crack of dawn to arrest a couple who just simply written some emails to their school objecting to the way that they were selecting a new and head teacher of the primary school that their young daughter attended, and a bunch of WhatsApp messages, held in a police cell for 8 hours. No charges then brought against them. 5 weeks later, basically, in January, being told, they were arrested, I think, in December, and then in January being told no charges are going to be brought. Why it took five weeks is something else. We're going to be talking to a local councillor who also was warned off by the police, don't get involved in this or you will face a crackdown. I mean, it is absolutely true. What on earth would the police be getting involved in, or why would they need to send 6 officers to handcuff parents in front of their 9-year-old child, to remove them from their home, in a house raid, for sending emails which we now know for a fact were not criminal?
Well, it beggars belief. I found it hard to fathom the thinking behind this when I saw the details of it. I mean, we have to always remember, and you'll be aware of this, Julia, because you've worked in journalism many years, that sometimes there are facts and there are details that emerge over time that weren't obvious at the beginning.
Except no charges are being brought.
No charges have been brought. But that doesn't mean that police, police often arrest people and then don't bring charges, and they're entitled to arrest people.
But I can imagine.
But in this case,
you would look. You would read the emails. The school would provide the emails, and you go, well, those aren't criminal, or they could be criminal, and then you would invite the couple in to have a conversation.
From what we know, it would appear to be a complete, over-the-top reaction from the police, not just to get involved in this, which is a difficult row between parents and the school, but then to send 6 police officers around. 6! Not even, if you wanted to interview the person, question them, invite them in for an interview at the police station. Look, we've had these concerns. I mean, that perhaps is at the minimum of what they, the maximum of what they should have done, I should say. But no, it appears to be completely over the top. I'm very pleased the Hertfordshire Police have launched a rapid review. The Police and Crime Commissioner has come out seeking answers. That's exactly what should happen.
But the fact that a councillor, the local county council, also emailed the school, this is all before the arrest, and asked questions about the recruitment issue on behalf of the couples, this is Maxie Allen and Rosalind Levine, and then a police officer emailed Michelle Vince telling her that that they were the subject of a communication and claimed there had been unreasonable, excessive emails sent to the school. I mean, who decides what are excessive and what are unreasonable if you're unhappy about? And it says if you continue to email the school, you may find yourself liable to being recorded as a suspect in a harassment investigation. I mean, an elected official seeking to represent a local person, sending an email asking, you know, can I get involved? Can I help? Sort of emails being threatened with. I mean, by a police officer. This is outrageous.
Yeah, I think even the MP, Oliver Dowden, was also he was on the email chain, so he may also have been implicated. Look, I think there's a huge amount of inexperience in policing at the moment, and I can only think that there aren't the wiser heads in Hertfordshire Constabulary who just say, hold on a minute, what are we doing getting involved in this? Why are we sending 6 officers round? You know, I think a lot of experience, a lot of people who would have urged restraint have gone from policing, and that someone's being overzealous and is really worried that if they don't somehow get involved, that they're going to be wrapped over the knuckles.
I'll tell you what, there are an awful lot of people who are responding to that story over the weekend, pointing out that they'd been burgled, they'd been threatened, they'd had, you know, a clear crime that had taken place. No police officer turning up at all, no police officer turning up even when they identified, you know, through like things like Find My Phone, where their device that had been stolen was. No police turning up at all. So it's interesting, they've got a spare 6 police officers to arrest apparently a Times radio producer and his wife over some emails to their school. Clearly not criminal, otherwise there'd be charges brought. Thank you very much indeed, Danny Shaw. Appreciate that. At 10:47 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. Up next, we're going to talk to a former advisor to the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry about, well, interestingly, fascinating, Donald Trump lashing out at Vladimir Putin, who says that he can't do a deal with Zelensky. Is this a good development or a bad development? We'll talk about that up next. This is Talk.
The disaster of Disney's remake of Snow White. There it is, Rachel Zegler. Not particularly Snow White, is she? Go woke, you go broke. This is a movie that cost $283 million to make in its first weekend, last weekend at the box office in America. It's brought in a feeble $43 million. $43 million. You would have made Disney $200 million in your first weekend, maybe $300 million, if you'd have just stuck to the traditional story.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning to you. Welcome back to the show. 10:50 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Sam Armstrong still with me. Get his thoughts on what our next guest has to say about where we are with Ukraine peace talks. Cormac Smith is a former advisor to the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry and joins us. Very good morning to you, Cormac.
Julia, delightful to see you again.
Thank you for joining us. Now, a very interesting development over the last 24 hours of Donald Trump lashing out at his big mate, Vladimir Putin, saying he's, let's be careful with the language here, peed off. I think I'll take out some of the key letters there, about their ceasefire talks, because Vladimir Putin has apparently said he's not really willing to hold ceasefire talks. He can't really trust Zelensky. He wants a transition government in Ukraine before he's willing to come to the table properly to do ceasefire talks. Trump has hit out at Putin, even threatened secondary sanctions on Russia on terms of their oil. So any country that buys Russian oil, India and China being the key offenders there, would face huge sort of 50% US tariffs, which would certainly have a massive impact on world trade and indeed on Russian finances, very likely. Do you think this is a row that is a good thing, as in Donald Trump is beginning to get the real cut of Putin's jib?
Julia, I would like to think so, but I have my doubts. Let's face it, it has been absolutely clear to anybody that Putin does not want a peace deal. Putin's ambitions for Ukraine are still maximalist. They are to take over all of Ukraine and obliterate Ukraine's identity. And can I say two things to remind people? There are two reasons and two reasons only, and I've been saying this since January 2022, that Putin wants to do this. One, they're the greatest threat to his kleptocratic mafia regime is a successful, democratic, thriving Ukraine on his doorstep, because that will really fuel his own people at home. And secondly, as Donald Trump seems to want to do now, he covets the potential great wealth of Ukraine, both its breadbasket status and also the rare earth metals that lie under Ukraine's black soil. So, promising words from Trump, but I am very, very skeptical. He is yet to put any pressure on Putin. So far, all the pressure he has put on has been on Zelensky.
What is interesting is that with the European leaders, I think, clearly advising Zelensky, look, just flatter Donald Trump, agree to everything when it goes to the table. And it's very interesting because, Putin basically saying, Ukraine hasn't agreed to ceasefire. Yeah, they have. And at that point, you expose that Putin is the problem. He's the one who doesn't want peace. Whereas a few weeks ago, months ago, so we had Donald Trump saying it was Zelensky who didn't want peace. But of course he wants peace, but its question is at what price? That's the key thing here. But it's interesting, Vladimir Putin criticising Zelensky, Donald Trump saying, questioning Zelensky. Well, of course, he called him a dictator only a month or so ago. But interestingly, it looks like this mineral deal is not going quite as it was seen. But again, obviously Zelensky's holding out, doesn't mind doing the mineral deal if he has to, but only if he gets some sort of security guarantee, which is still not forthcoming.
Yeah, let's be very, very clear. Over a month ago, the Americans proposed an unconditional, and that's the word to focus on, ceasefire, which Zelensky immediately agreed to. Putin responded by putting conditions on that ceasefire that Ukraine could never sign up to. The mineral deal is tantamount to mafia extortion, to be honest. What we understand of it at the moment is there would be a board, there would be majority, say the Americans would retain a veto on the board, although there would be Ukrainians on it. The Americans would take all profits up front, and they would decide what to give to the Ukrainians at some stage in the undefined future, and it would be in perpetuity. So this, as my understanding, is a deal that Zelensky simply cannot sign up for. Very interesting. I was listening to a member of the Holos Party, that's the main opposition party in the Rada, the parliament, say, I think it was on Saturday morning on another station, that this is something, because it would have a generational effect on Ukraine, would have to go to the Rada for a vote This minerals deal, I believe, is a non-starter.
Yeah, they simply wouldn't vote for it. And then indeed, again, this is always on the basis that Donald Trump spouts this. And again, complete and utter lie that the money that the Europeans have given was on a loan basis and the money the Americans given was just given as a grant. Simply not true. The vast majority of the money from Europe has been given as a grant. We're not expecting anything back for it. In terms of where this goes now, I mean, is this just, we're just going to see how this plays out? Do you think there is a possibility that there'll be a wake-up call in the White House? I mean, you certainly know people like Secretary Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State of the United States. He was very sound on Ukraine until he signed up with Donald Trump, that actually behind the scenes, many of the sensible figures, the military figures and others and the security officials in the White House will be hoping that Donald Trump realises that Putin is making him look like, Trump is looking like a chump for believing Vladimir Putin, and eventually Putin will overplay his hand and Donald Trump will have no choice but, if he wants to look like the strong man, to basically come out to Putin.
I would have said this 6 months ago, and I did. I thought there might be a point, and, I discussed this with our mutual good friend, Philip Ingram.
Yeah.
And we thought that there would become a point where Trump might turn on Putin. I don't see that happening, but I fear might happen if Ukraine refuses to sign this minerals deal. We could see the withdrawal of US aid and intelligence again. But on the funding, it was never a loan to be paid back. No. His $350 billion is a complete lie. The best audited figure is $119 billion, of which over 70% has stayed in the US economy. Europe, by the way, combined, has given more than the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's the fact that these things are just spouted again and again and again. They're simply untrue. Really appreciate you joining us. Fascinating to see what comes of this. Cormac Smith, a former advisor to the Ukrainian Foreign Ministry. Sam Armstrong, listening to all of this. Do you have any hope that Trump is going to basically have to eventually realise that Putin is playing him? Was Putin overplaying his hand?
Yeah, I'm a bit more optimistic than Cormac. Putin is a guy that if you give him an inch, he'll take a mile. In this case, Donald Trump has offered him 200 miles of Ukraine and he's demanding the whole entire country and all of Eastern Europe with it. Now, Donald Trump knows he can't sign up to that deal. He knows and he's seen Biden's totemic disaster of the collapse in Afghanistan, and I think he'll be haunted by this. So he will have to start drawing the line somewhere. And the one thing I would say about Donald Trump is he's always been able to pivot. And
I mean, at a moment, I mean, genuinely, he could do it in one meeting.
Yeah, and the thing that might trigger him is not the sort of rational thing that would trigger anyone else. So,
but if he's a laughing stock on the world stage, which he is on this for many, many people. I know the MAGA right, which the stuff he sees on Fox News is also like, oh, you're so right, Donald Trump, with the rest of the world is going, this is crazy, and he is a laughingstock. I think the mockery for him believing this man, I can cope with him if he does have some clever 4D game of chess going on. That's great. It is, this is his cunning ways. I just don't think. I think he genuinely thinks they've got some sort of friendship, and he can trust this guy. I mean, he's been wrapped around Vladimir Putin's little finger. I mean, I think it's embarrassing. At the point when he realises this, and other people point it out to him, if anyone's brave enough to do that, then he could change. Those secondary sanctions, that would have the biggest single impact, wouldn't it? Because all the time when we're, not buying Russian oil and Russian gas in Europe, and particularly hit countries like Germany, India and China have been buying it at cut price rate, funding the Ukrainian war. So if they then get hit with massive sanctions on selling goods to the US, they're going to see, big start questioning that. That could actually hit his war effort.
Yeah, absolutely right. And it will put the lie to how much Biden did, which he never went there, never did that. There. On the other hand, Donald Trump can't put tariffs on everybody all at once, all of the time. Well, so again, he's going to have to make some choices.
Those tariffs coming in this week, of course, it's going to be absolutely fascinating. There's so much more to talk about. Do stay tuned. We've got so much more to cover, including Prince Harry and his Centre Bali charity. What is going on there? More on tackling migrants, more on two-tier sentencing coming in tomorrow. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer.
I can announce this government will begin the biggest sustained increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War. Yeah. We will deliver our commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence, but we will bring it forward so we reach that level in 2027.
The answer from European capitals has been as resounding as it is clear. We are in an era of rearmament. To respond to the short-term urgency to act and to support Ukraine, but also to address the long-term need to take on more responsibility for our own European security.
On Saturday, we also agreed a new £2.2 billion loan for Ukraine, backed not by the British taxpayer, but by the profits from frozen Russian assets. It is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sent his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman. A great, great gentleman. He said he thinks the war's going to go on for a long time, and he better not be right. Well, I just think he should be more appreciative, because this country has stuck with them through thick and thin. We've given them much more than Europe, and Europe should have given more than us, because as you know, that's right there, that's the border.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr.
are not
President,
strong...
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. It's coming up 3 minutes past 11. Thank you so much for your company, whether you are listening on DAB+ radio or listening on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or watching on your connected device, whichever one you haven't tried, have a go at that. Brush my hair and everything. Sam Armstrong put on a very smart suit. Conservative commentator who's come to join us today. Big Monday, sunny, beautiful day smile. Doesn't it make a difference?
Oh, it so does. What a weekend of weather.
I know. And for Mother's Day as well. By the way, did you enjoy Mother's Day? I mean, I know there are people people always make out the point, it's a very difficult day for those people who've lost their mothers. I do understand that. But for most people, it's a day of, joy and pleasure, or remembering, if you've lost your mother, remembering, your mother for most people. But I was interested to see that the Prime Minister did put out a message yesterday on Instagram about Mother's Day, but didn't manage one on X. Where he's got far more followers, obviously, and of course he's a politician, but it was all about the end of Eid. I have to say, I was a little bit peeved in a sort of, he doesn't seem to ever mention Easter, doesn't seem to ever mention any other religious festivals, certainly the national religious festivals in this country where you have public holidays and the like, but absolutely sodding obsessed with any Islamic holiday. But the big event yesterday, I think, for most people in this country was Mother's Day, was it not?
Well, it's almost as if there's two tiers of celebrations in this country.
Yeah, I mean, I genuinely was really quite irked by that. I don't mind him not sending a message about either. I just found it very, very, very bizarre when you're talking about a message that goes to a tiny minority of people. But by the way, Muslims are mothers too. So you're actually forgetting all the Muslim mothers in the country as well. I just don't know why politicians have to constantly bang on about religious festivals, particularly minority religious festivals. I mean, does he mark any significant days to the Scientology calendar? I don't know. Are they big Labour voters? Anyway, all very bizarre if you ask me. But anyway, coming up in the show, we are going to be talking more about other significant things, including the 40 countries in London for a border security summit today. I mean, we've got more than immigrants from more than 40 countries coming to this country as illegal migrants, but he's pledging to lead a global crackdown on illegal immigration. The Prime Minister is urging nations to unite behind a new approach to smash those smuggling gangs with greater intelligence sharing amid record levels of Channel migrants in the first 3 months of this year. Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, has put it down to the weather, but that's kind of the point, isn't it? Actually, they don't have any say over any of this stuff. It's all fundamentally down to the weather, and smashing the gangs is never going to happen unless you actually stop the pull factor. You're not going to stop people coming. But I do want to hear from you on this. You give us a call as Keir Starmer hosts that International Border Security Summit. Will his global crackdown work? Tell us why it will. Tell us why it won't. I'd love to hear from you if you think it will. I mean, I think only Yvette Cooper and Keir Starmer are going to suggest that, or any of the other people who are on the gravy train of this, because there's a lot of people earning a lot of money out of this. So do get in touch. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. You can text us on 87222. Get in touch on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1. Standard network rate message. Also going to be talking about two-tier justice. It is a two-tier Tuesday tomorrow. Ethnic minority criminal suspects have been given priority for bail by judges under this new justice guidelines drawn up by the Ministry of Justice. At the same time as the Ministry of Justice and the Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood are planning to change the law, literally bring a legal change in the House of Commons this week to override new two-tier justice guidelines drawn up by the Sentencing Council, an independent, unelected, unaccountable quango, that come into force tomorrow that would effectively see lower sentences for people if they are from ethnic, religious or community minorities, or people claiming to be trans. We do genuinely live in... They're so blatant about it. They're not even lying about it anymore. They're being open about it. We do have two-tier justice. Plus, we're going to talk about what on earth is going on with Centre Bali. That's the charity set up by Prince Harry in memory of his mother in southern Africa. The head of the African charity, co-founded by the Duke of Sussex, accused him of harassment and bullying at scale after he stood down last week. The Centre Bali charity's head, Sophie Chanduka, claims the organisation has been damaged by the toxicity of the Duke of Sussex's brand. Plus, ministers have called on the House of Commons to change its absurd expenses rules, allowing MPs to claim rental expenses for pets. I kid you not, this comes after Labour MP Taiwo Awatami claimed £900 on expenses as pet rent for her cockapoo Bella. The world has gone utterly, utterly mad. This is Talk. As I say, welcome to the home of common sense. Well, we'll come to that a little bit later in the show. But Sam Armstrong, let's just come back briefly to this International Border Security Summit. I think we safely agree, a conversation in the last hour, nothing that happens in this summit is going to tackle the gangs. Nothing that's being done by Rishi Sunak or Liz Truss in a short period in office, Boris Johnson has tackled the gangs. Nothing's happened since Keir Starmer has been in charge. We've seen the highest number of people, over more than 5,000 people arriving in the first 3 months of this year. It's down to the lovely clement weather and the calm seas, according to Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, rather spelling out the fact that they have no control over how many people get on these boats and how many people arrive here. What we only have control over is what happens when they're in either British territorial waters or on British land. And they're still not willing to do anything about it, are they?
Yeah, actually, I disagree with you there, Julia.
Oh.
They do have control over it. What they don't have is, and I'm sorry to be crude, they don't have the balls. They don't have the courage, the chutzpah, the backbone, the spine to stand up and say, do you know what? We are going to withdraw from the European Court of Human Rights. If you say we can't send people off to Rwanda, if you say we can't take people back, if you say we've got to give them each...
I don't think the ECHR is still the problem. I think activist judges. I think the way that they are, even in the tribunals for asylum seekers and their appeals, allowing people to stay because their son might not like, Albanian chicken nuggets. We have an activist judge class.
What? I don't actually believe that we can fire all of the judges in this country and start again. The way you deal with it in politics is you change the law. And the law, it is clear, needs to change. It needs to be the case. You arrive here, you're gone within the day. The sun shouldn't set on a migrant illegally in this country. That should be the stay. Politicians are absolutely 100% empowered to do that. Keir Starmer has a huge majority in the House of Commons. He could do it if he wanted to do it. He doesn't want to do it. He's not prepared to stand up to his old mates in the legal
Now, why is it, again, because I think this is the same issue with the Tories. I wonder why they didn't do it, because you saw they talked a good game on it and then failed to do it. Again, Boris Johnson talked a game about taking back control and then basically agreed for 1.2 million people to come every year, 2 or 3 years, the Boris wave of legal migrants. But how on earth you can be in government? I mean, and both parties, by the way, big majorities, able to change the law at any time if they so chose, or choose right now. Why do you think they don't want to do it? Because they know it harms them electorally. Is it because they don't want to be thought of as being nasty and racist and bigoted? Do they genuinely believe these people have a right to be here and these are genuine asylum seekers and the people who are most in need of coming to our shores are a bunch of sort of 20-year-old men?
No, they believe that taking this action would be drastic, and it would be drastic, right? It would be fundamentally changing the legal framework on which we're based. They believe it would be controversial, and it would be controversial.
Not as controversial as having thousands of illegal migrants wandering the streets.
And they believe, crucially, that this conspiracy of silence, that this conspiracy of inaction, that this pretense in which everyone talks a big game but does nothing on migration is a sustainable political reality. And why wouldn't they, Julia?
Yeah.
Because they have gotten away with this for 30 years now. They've spent their entire political career getting away with lying to the British public about what they intend to do with migration, and all the while, them and all of their mates have done very well on the back of it.
Well, hold on a minute. They've got away with it for a period of time when there wasn't an alternative like Reform UK offering a difference, like saying we're going to tackle this, as what's happened in Europe as well. I have just breaking news. Just as we came on air an hour ago, we had breaking news that Marine Le Pen, the leader of National Rally, the woman who's been in the runoff against Macron twice for the French presidential elections, that she had been found guilty of embezzlement as an MEP of European Union funds, faced a prison sentence, but also crucially being banned from running from office for 5 years. Just to let you know, breaking news, the judge has said that Marine Le Pen and her National Rally associates have been banned from running for office, bearing in mind that her party was the single biggest party at the last parliamentary elections, those snap elections called last spring by the leader Emmanuel Macron, which went obviously horribly wrong for him. He thought he kind of called the bluff of these parties. Now, the judge has not said for how long Marine Le Pen and her associates would be banned, or whether or not that would take effect immediately or not. We know that Marine Le Pen is going to appeal, hopefully to delay the ban possibly until after the 2027 presidential election, when she was expected to stand. Emmanuel Macron not standing for a third term. I don't believe I think constitutionally not allowed to. But we don't know who she's up against. But given how close she has come as the runoff candidate, proving her standing each time, the popularity she's seen growing around the country in France, particularly among younger people, very, very likely, highly likely that she could win that presidential election in 2 years' time. But if she is banned from running for elected office as a result of this embezzlement case, what happens then? Now, this is an extraordinary development, is it not, Sam Armstrong? And curiously, more significant for France than it would have been for Donald Trump. Now, this idea of lawfare being brought against candidates who say the wrong thing and think the wrong thing. She's been found guilty of embezzlement in the French courts. That is the judgment of the court. But we saw what happened with Donald Trump. Now, I'm of the view that those cases were perfectly legitimate to be brought against him, but the timing of them was clearly about stopping him running for office. But the American Constitution does not bar you from running for presidency, or indeed even being president, with a criminal record, or even from prison after being convicted. France actually preventing her from, because it's related to her actions as an elected official, possibly preventing her from standing. This could be extraordinarily significant for France, couldn't it?
She was just on the precipice of taking over that country.
Yeah.
Liberals around the West have long proclaimed themselves as pure believers in the political system that they hold and they elevate above all else. Increasingly, they are beginning to appear, and it's just an appearance, but beginning to appear like the kind of tin pot dictators that we know of around the world. Oh yeah, there's a kind of politician that's threatening to overturn all of everything that we believe in, all of the things that we treasure, that's really popular. Oh yeah, just before they're about to run, we're going to convict them of embezzlement and we're going to ban them from running for office.
I'm going to have to assume if the court found the case that this is the case. I have a funny feeling that if they did do this, that actually an awful lot of MEPs are doing it, but the case has been brought against them. I don't know. But crucially, it shouldn't really be for the courts to decide who can and cannot sign. That was my view on Donald Trump, which is that, if the American people want to elect somebody, even if he's convicted of these things, that's up to them.
This was happening 2 weeks ago in Turkey, and we all knew and could feel it for what it was. I think
it's always, if Erdogan does it, absolutely terrible. This is terrible. The independent, the opposition leader being banned from standing for office, that's terrible. If it's Turkey, we don't like Erdogan. But if it happens in France, then, it's completely different.
I have a standard, which is let politics be about politics. If people want to vote for people, let them do that. And law should be about law, and everybody should be able to have faith in the law to know that you're going to get fair, equal justice. Not in this country anymore, but that should be the principle. When the two mix, it's always dangerous, it's always bad. There's been far too much of it, and the left have been pushing
Let me let you know, the presiding judge in the French court, this is after actually Marine Le Pen had left the court, said that Marine Le Pen will receive a provisional ban from standing. We still don't know how long it will be. If it's less than 18 months, she can still run for the presidency because I think presumably there's quite a long run-up period for putting in nominations. She can still run for the presidency of France. So we'll wait and find out if there's any more information on that. But absolutely fascinating. Love to hear your thoughts on that, because again, lawfare involved. And I agree with you, absolutely agree with you, Sam. I mean, I think people should be given the choice. I don't care what someone has done, guilty or not guilty. I think people should be given the choice about whether or not who they want to be their elected representative. It's kind of irrelevant, isn't it? Do give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. We've got a couple of guests coming up in just a couple of moments talking about, the extraordinary situation that we do have in terms of, we talked about two-tier justice. We'll talk more about that in terms of the two-tier Tuesday coming in tomorrow, but also the extraordinary heavy-handed policing that we've seen, certainly post Southport, heavy-handed sentencing, and when we are just seeing that if you're rioting with one particular motive, you get given, or you're writing something on social media of one particular motive, you get one kind of sentence, and if you have a different kind of motive, come from a different politics, basically the left, you don't get that sort of sentence. It's so blatant and clear, it's so obvious. I don't know how anyone could even deny it, although apparently even claiming there's two-tier justice makes you a bigot in this country, as we've been told. Far right and bigoted. So we're all far right and bigoted now for knowing facts, and same way we're all transphobic for knowing that men can't become women. But those are the words that just get thrown at people. How's that working for your political class? I would say not very well by looking at the polls. But here's the crucial thing. Over the weekend we had this extraordinary case of a couple who'd been emailing their daughter's primary school complaining about the process for selecting a new head teacher. A large number of emails by all accounts. The school decided they felt this was harassment. Then there was a WhatsApp parents group they were messaging in, and the police turned up heavy-handed, 6 police officers, raiding their home, putting this couple in front of their 9-year-old daughter in handcuffs, extraordinarily, 8 hours in police cells being questioned. 5 then released. 5 weeks later, being told in January, no, it turns out no case to answer. And not only that, warnings given to a local councillor and indeed the local MP, Sir Oliver Dowden, a Conservative MP, former Deputy Prime Minister of this country, by the way, extraordinarily telling them basically, don't get involved or the police will come and, question you as well. This is outrageous, is it not?
Yeah, let's just put aside the grotesque abuse of police resources to have done this in the first place. Let's put aside the fact that these people were clearly wrongfully arrested. There was no justification, in my view, for the arrest, certainly not so heavy-handedly. And let's just deal with the councillor and the MP. That was an equivalent to a coup d'etat. I'm sorry to put it that highly. You have an absolute 100% solemn, total right to democratic representation in this country. I don't care if you're in prison. I don't care how disgracefully you've conducted yourself, you have that absolute right. It's a total safeguard. It's a safety valve for everything we need. For a police officer to conduct themselves like the Stasi by banning them from standing up for them, that a police officer needs to be fired.
Yes.
And a message needs to be sent out. Never again.
It's got to stop. It's absolutely got to stop, isn't it? Well, I'm delighted to say in the next couple of moments we are going to be talking to the local councillor Michelle Vince, who was sent this message from the police, and we're going to be talking to former Deputy Prime Minister, the local MP, Sir Oliver Dowden as well. They're up next. You do not want to miss that. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
They're an intolerant, poisonous lot, these people, who want to push their progressive ways upon us all to the point where they are now so intolerant they are being prejudicial against those of us who are indigenous, were born here, raised here, have raised further generations, future generations, and trace all our ancestry back just about as long as you can imagine.
I mean, I do find it...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Now, I'm sure you were as shocked as I was. Oh, should we be shocked, really, in this day and age, when we saw the extraordinary news about a couple who had been writing emails complaining to their local primary school about, well, how they were selecting a new head teacher. Their young daughter attends the school, and they were very unhappy. This is Maxie Allen and Rosalind Levine about the process. So they wrote to the school again and again and again. They also joined a local parents' WhatsApp group about this. And then they found themselves arrested, a raid at their home by 6 police officers, turning up, handcuffing the parents, holding them in police custody for 8 hours, and then 5 weeks later being told that actually, well, their communications were not malicious. They had not committed a crime. In the meantime, a local councillor, Michelle Vince, was also told by a police officer who, after she had emailed the school alongside CCing Oliver Dowden, the local MP, that she and the MP shouldn't get involved, or they could face charges too. What on earth is going on? Well, in just a couple of moments we'll talk to the councillor Michelle Vince, and right now I'm delighted to welcome Sir Oliver Dowden, Conservative MP, former Deputy Prime Minister and the local MP for this couple, to the show. A very good morning to you, Sir Oliver.
Good morning, Julia. Delighted to be on with you.
This is just such an extraordinary story. It's the front page of the Times. In fact, Maxie Allen, the father involved, he is a producer at Times Radio. We know that there was nothing malicious or offensive or threatening in these emails. We know that because the police are not pressing charges. It took them 5 weeks to make that decision. But the circumstances in which two parents complaining about something going on at their primary school, which quite a lot of parents do these days, as they are illegally entitled to do, being arrested, handcuffed by 6 police officers from their home in front of their child. Just first of all, your reaction to that?
Well, I think something has gone very badly wrong with policing in this country that this should happen for 2 reasons. First is about the priorities of the police. I am constantly being contacted by people saying, I've had a burglary, there's no point contacting the police because they won't turn up. Or people have walked into a shop, shoplifted stuff, the shop owner doesn't bother calling the police because they don't bother turning up. Yeah. And yet in an instant like this, 6 police officers can turn up. So what does that say about priorities? And secondly, about the kind of country that we live in, because it's always been the case that people should be able to freely express their views without the fear of the state looking over their shoulders and getting involved. This simply is not a matter for the police, which is why I very much welcome the fact the Chief Constable to whom I've spoken is conducting a thorough investigation. But I think more broadly as a society, we need to stand up against this excessive authoritarianism.
Well, indeed. I mean, you spoke to the Chief Constable of Hertfordshire Police. They're the police responsible for this. But, you know, these police officers didn't do it off their own bat. Someone senior would have authorised this, for goodness sake. And we know also Hertfordshire Police, you know, if you look down their actual track record, and it's fascinating how often the police, the local police who do these things often have the worst record when it comes to the actual crimes that people are concerned about, street robbery, shoplifting, burglary and the like. They don't seem to, certain police officers, they have a very poor track record of actually prosecuting people responsible for the crimes people are concerned about. But as you say, they've got 6 officers for this. But it's all very well Chief Constable saying, oh, this is terrible, but it happened on his watch.
Well, there's a new Chief Constable. He's been appointed very recently. In fact, before I became aware of this incident, I spoke to him. I am convinced that he both wants to get to the bottom of this and has got a robust focus.
Should heads roll?
Well, first of all, I think he's got a robust focus in terms of what's needed, shoplifting, burglary and so on. Let's wait for the outcome of this and find out exactly what's going on. What I would say is that in respect of the individual officers, I think, Julie, you're totally right to say that we shouldn't be expecting often very young officers to be making these kind of judgments. We should be clearer as a society, from the Home Office, from the Chief Constable downwards, that this sort of thing does not require the police to get involved. Yeah. And I think that's the kind of cultural shift as a society, led by the government and by individuals in Parliament like myself. I hope to raise this in Parliament today. We need a change of approach as a society.
And yet it was, let's be honest, it was under the Tories, in which you served as Deputy Prime Minister, it was under the Conservatives that this rise in sort of police getting involved in our freedom of speech has exponentially grown. It is, you know, it happened with non-crime hate incidents. They were brought in 2014 by the Police College. Doesn't matter, you know, Home Secretary after Home Secretary saying, no, we want you to stop doing it. They carry on. I mean, what is the point of us even bothering to elect a government, bothering to have an elected Home Secretary, an elected Prime Minister, if you can't stop this stuff from happening? You're not even able to stop, you know, the sentencing, saying that, you know, I as a woman should get a lower sentence than you because I'm a woman, but if I were black, I'd get an even lower sentence. Or if you were a trans woman, you'd get a lower sentence. I mean, you can't even seem to stop that. Do we actually have any democratic oversight of these things anymore?
Well, Julia, I think it's a very fair challenge. Of course, I totally disagree with those sentencing guidelines, and I read in the newspapers, I'm not in government anymore, that the government is looking at bringing forward legislation to address that. I think that's completely the right thing to do. But it's also a fair challenge that as a society, both governments of successive colours have allowed a situation to arise where this sort of thing is normalised. And I think it is important, regardless of how we've got to this situation, to take a stand and to say it's not acceptable for the police to get involved in what are the normal kind of sometimes robust discussions that happen in civic society. And one of the great virtues of this nation over many centuries is people have felt free to express their views without the state through the proxy of the police getting involved. And I think we need to have a rebalancing back to that.
The worry, of course, is a lot of people point out in these scenarios, the process is the punishment, even though often in these cases, especially once they're publicised, especially when the Free Speech Union gets involved, that actually, you know, nothing actually ends up happening. But the trauma people have gone through, it does mean that they are wary of speaking out. It does mean that other people see it and go, oh, I better be careful. I mean, if you've got a problem with your school and you're talking about your child, I mean, this couple were banned from attending, you know, they're watching their child in a school play. Now, we don't know about their behaviour. We don't, you know, but certainly we know that there was nothing certainly illegal or criminal in their emails. It does look like the school has massively overacted in a totally inappropriate way. But there's never, it would seem, there's never any punishment effectively for the people who make these claims, you know, so, you know, the teachers, whoever it was who made the police claim, the police officer who made the decision to go and, you know, raid their house, no one ever faces any punishment for that, shouldn't they?
But first of all, I don't want to get into the details of what's happened with the school because I don't know all of the facts.
You weren't even involved in the case. You were just CC'd, weren't you?
Yeah, quite. So, I mean, I'm CC'd into many cases as a member of Parliament and get involved if I'm asked to get involved. But the thing that really worries me about this case is the chilling effect that it has. And it's not an isolated example. We're all very familiar with the case of the Telegraph journalist Alison Pearson having similar treatment. And indeed, on that very day that police officers in Essex were knocking on the door of Alison Pearson, in Hertfordshire, in my own constituency in Potters Bar, a remembrance parade, they were told by the police they didn't have the resources to stop the traffic. So I think there's twofold. One, the police need to get on with the job that constituents want them to do. And two, we need to move the police out of getting involved in matters which are for civic society and for debate, because that, whether people get vindicated in the individual case, it creates that chilling effect. Okay. And that's the fundamental issue for me here.
So Oliver Dowden, Conservative MP, former Deputy Prime Minister, very much appreciate you joining us. Thank you very much indeed. In fact, his only involvement in this was actually being CC'd in an email sent by the local county councillor, Michelle Vince, who was trying to help the family in this matter, emailing the school, until she got an email from the police warning her off. I'm delighted to say Michelle Vince joins us now as well. Very good morning to you, Michelle.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for joining us. Again, this is utterly extraordinary. I mean, it's extraordinary that this couple faced this heavy-handed approach from the police and indeed from the school. I have to say, pull your kid out of that school would be, to everybody is what is my advice I would give at this point. But the fact that you were simply a local elected official, they contacted you and you got involved in an email. You received an email from the police, an officer, let me quote, saying, extraordinarily, basically saying, you may find yourself liable to be, unless you cease communications with the school, you may find yourself liable to being recorded as a suspect in a harassment investigation. What did you make of it when you saw that email?
I was horrified. And before I saw the email, I spoke to the police officer on the phone. He read it to me. I was horrified. It was asking me to pass on the warnings to people that were CC'd into the email, including Sir Oliver Dowden. You know, I wasn't prepared to pass on a warning to him.
About what he can or can't get involved in. Had you met the family? Had they been in contact with you? What was your link to them?
So I know the family. I'm local. I know many of the local families. They're a delightful family. I knew about the situation back in May when there was a need for a new head teacher at the school because the previous head teacher had decided to retire and had given notice in. And I got some messages in May of 2024 from concerned residents, and not just this family,
very interesting,
saying that there was no attempt being made to find a new head teacher, and could I find out exactly what was going on. So I emailed the school at that time asking if the position had been openly advertised and what was going to happen with it. And that was, I think, on the 21st of May, 2024. And the next time I emailed them was the 12th of December, or the 10th of December.
So, yes, absolutely, a campaign of harassment, of course. And it wasn't just this couple raising concerns. It was really like,
no.
Could we please have a new head teacher? Can you get the process going? We need to have a new head teacher. Because we all know a good, strong head teacher is absolutely the key to a school doing well. And we know that this couple who were impacted by this, Maxie Allen and his wife, Rosalind Levine, that they've got a daughter who has a number of special needs. So it would be absolutely crucial to them, along with every other parent. I mean, I certainly would have been one of the people emailing the school in this scenario. Presumably you saw some of their emails, you've met with them, you know them. Do you think that it was likely that any of their emails were in any way malicious or harassing?
The emails are asking about the child, talking about the child, discussing her medication. There is nothing in those emails that could be seen as offensive in any way. I think it's important to understand that they received a parent ban and were only allowed to reach out to the school or contact the school by email. So yeah. Everything had to go by email.
They couldn't have a sort of a chat at the school gate because they weren't allowed.
No.
But here's the school ban. I'm very good friends with the head teacher of an inner city school, and they have a number of parents at that school, a number of dads in particular, who are banned from the school gates, even being within 200 metres, because of threats of violence and actual violence. They have to be banned. There'd be nothing of the sort in this case.
Nothing. And it is so severe. The reaction was so heavy-handed that people are thinking there must be much more to this. There must be more to it. There isn't any more to it. They was inquiring over when the school would get a new head teacher.
Yeah. I mean, the most basic, reasonable request that a teacher could have. When you got that phone call and got the email from the police officer, what was your response to him or her?
I was already terrified because the police had already visited the parents' house, and they'd contacted me on the evening of the 20th to say, we've had the police round, they're going to come round to you.
This is December, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, and I called the police. Nobody had been around, so I called the police station, and the officer wasn't available to speak to. So I called again. That was a Friday evening. I called again on the Saturday evening, and the officer that I spoke to on that evening then read me my rights.
Yep.
I actually realised he was reading me my rights. I thought he was talking to somebody else. And then I said, are you saying that to me? He said, yes, we may use anything you say. I said, I'm really sorry, I'm ending the conversation.
Good
so
for
I just
you.
put the phone down. And so the following evening, the Sunday, I spoke to the actual officer. He told me, I've sent you an email Friday night, which I hadn't opened the email, to your counsellor email. I'll read it to you. I was horrified. I said, but you're asking me not to speak with the parents. You're asking me not to... An
elected local councillor representing local parents.
You're taking away his democratic rights.
That's just extraordinary.
And I said, I'll have to seek advice on this. And he said, if you want to complain about me, you can. I said,
oh, yeah.
I'm not saying I'm complaining about you. I'm saying I need advice.
Yeah.
The family have democratic rights.
Can I chat? I mean, do you think your head should roll? Do you think people should be...
100% I do. I do. I think there should be a thorough investigation, both into the police and into the school. We need to know what happened between the school and the police for the police to take this action.
Absolutely extraordinary. I mean, it's just the most extraordinary story. And yet, weirdly, not surprising in this country anymore, which is the very big worrying thing. Michelle Vince is a county councillor. Thank you so much for joining us. A big thanks to Oliver Dowden as well. Let me just come back to Sam Armstrong briefly, because we'll have to go to very late for a break. But again, this is a shocking story, but not surprising in this country anymore.
Yeah, and I'm not prepared to let that police officer, who might be junior, off the hook. If you've gone on to a counsellor and behaved in the way that we've just had set out, you do not deserve to be...
Got no business
possessing a badge
you
that
have
allows
way too much power.
To arrest people on the streets. You don't deserve it. If you don't understand the basic tenets of our democracy, the society we live in, you are not fit to be a policeman.
Absolutely. My worry is I don't think most of the chief constables have. I certainly don't think Police College have, and I'm pretty sure an awful lot of people in government, both Tories and Labour, don't either. I'd love to hear your reaction to those interviews. Do give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Give us a call about any of the topics we're talking about. 11:37 is the time. Up next, going to talk about what on earth is going on at the Centre Bale, the Prince Harry charity. This is Talk, Home of Common Sense.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 11:40 is the time. Sam Armstrong with me right now. Let's talk about Prince Harry. Look, I've got to be honest with you, with people getting arrested for writing an email to their school and madness going on of illegal migration and the like. I mean, there are Ukraine war. There are a lot of other priorities, but yes, Prince Harry often comes to the fore. Huge big story over the weekend, front pages of many of the papers, even still today, was what's going on at his Centre charity, a charity set up in southern Africa, basically in memory of his mother Diana. And it's been a really important charity. It's done some great work for kids, particularly kids suffering from AIDS and HIV, and in a country where it's, certainly in Lesotho, in South Africa, everything, Botswana, absolutely rife, and people often basically spurn advice from society if they do get AIDS or HIV. Now, we have this ridiculous scenario where we've had a massive falling out between Prince Harry and the board of trustees, and he's a patron of the charity, obviously, and the woman running the charity. Huge big falling out. And we kind of heard Prince Harry's version of events last week, that actually, they no longer had trust in the charity boss, the chief executive. They asked her to go, and she won't go. She'd actually even gone to the courts here to try and stop from going. She did an interview with Sky yesterday. This is Dr. Sophie Chandauka. I mean, she's a British trained lawyer, but she runs a charity, used to work for the charity many years ago as well, after it was set up early on. And she's accused the Prince and other members of the board of harassment and bullying at scale, of unleashing the whole Sussex PR machine against her, and saying that actually, some of the things that Prince Harry has done when it comes to things like arranging these, absurd big sort of charity polo matches, wanting to bring along his Netflix film crew, meant that they lost a venue. It cost them lots more money. Meghan had been unhappy that she got bad publicity after she appeared to ask the charity boss, basically, can you move away? I want to stand next to Harry when he's got the trophy from this polo match. And that she refused to put out a statement saying, no, Meghan didn't do anything of the sort, no problem here. And she refused to do that, and she's being punished for it. There's allegations of sexism, racism, bullying, harassment. What do you make of it?
Do you know what? Sophie Chandauka deserves a medal, because she's done something that I never thought would be possible, which is to get me to sympathise with Prince Harry. I never thought it would happen. This woman has gone because, there's been an attempt to get rid of her, because the entire rest of the board, who are all the old royal people, these aren't Harry's new mates, these are the old mates, have said, look, you've gone off, you've spent hundreds of thousands of pounds, you've raised nothing, it's all bad, we've lost faith in you.
She said, well, you can't raise any money because Harry's kind of a bit toxic.
Harry has raised the vast chunk of the money that this charity has raised over the years. It's the one good thing that he was still doing. This woman has come in, seems to have blown it all up, and gone on the tour of the televisions, calling everyone every name under the sun.
It is fascinating. Well, let's talk to royal commentator Rafe Hadel-Manku, who joins us right now to talk about this. A very good morning to you, Rafe.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. I mean, this is a sort of he said, she said, ostensibly, although she was on telly yesterday saying, she's got copies of text messages from other members of the trustees and people who work there, basically saying they're horrified by the way he was speaking to her in these meetings, these Zoom meetings, and she felt it's totally sort of overblown. I find the racism allegations quite bizarre. It's sort of, you set up a charity in Africa. I don't know, is it a colonial thing? We certainly know that she is someone, she's spoken about how they've had to move the charity, a lot of the running of the charity away from London and away to Africa, post Black Lives Matter and the like. So I think she probably comes from a certain sensibility where a lot of these allegations get thrown up. But whose side fundamentally are you on? The Sussexes, on Harry's side, or her side?
I think it's too early for anyone to actually make any definitive statement as to who they're aligning with.
That won't stop people.
Because I know. Well, many of our viewers, I'm sure, many people in general, will be feeling something akin to Schadenfreude that the Sussexes, whether the allegations are true or false, they're getting a bit of a taste of their own medicine, having put the royal family into pretty much the same position with their baseless accusations of bullying and racism.
And that's one of the issues, isn't it? Whenever I see people saying someone's being accused of bullying or racism or any of these things, I'm always like, what did they actually say? What did they actually give me something specific? Otherwise, I don't take this stuff serious anymore, because these words are just used, just all. Someone looked at you the wrong way. Oh, well, it must have been this or that. That said, some of the specifics she did talk about in this interview on Sky yesterday about things like, they've got this big charity polo match, which basically is shindig for all the rich and famous. Meghan decides to turn up at the last minute with Serena Williams, the celebrity. All things that get out of kilter. I'm not sure why that would be a problem for the charity personally, but they're having to move the venue because fundamentally the people who were originally doing it wouldn't do it on anything other than commercial terms. If Harry brought along his Netflix film crew, but Harry wouldn't refuse to renege on that. So there is an element where you think, well, was he putting his Netflix career and his income from Netflix above the needs of the charity, or did he think it would help? There does seem to have been a big sort of clash of, I suppose, what the charity was for.
That's right. I mean, essentially, there's that. There's the fact that, of course, attending board meetings, he would suddenly put forward things that weren't on the agenda. He parachuted in a new board member, which his proxy and another person voted for without consulting the board, and it was taken as a fait accompli. You have all that sort of stuff. Also, the allegations, essentially, that Prince Harry has wanted her out for months and essentially was turning sponsors against her in order to undermine her attempt at fundraising. Therefore, of course, if she can't raise the money, more impetus for her to leave. It has to be said, this is not a person that you'd expect to be a thin-skinned snowflake, right? No. She's a very serious woman. She's a doctor, was a high-flying corporate lawyer working for Morgan Stanley, in a very senior role, biotech entrepreneur, also a very senior role for Meta, which owns Facebook and Instagram. Well,
he may have picked on the wrong person then, because she wasn't going to take it from him. But there was a lot of talk about how the way the charity was run was kind of, that may have been fine when you were a royal in 2006, but it doesn't really fly now. These things to be done properly. And he's just doing it on the, well, it's my mate and I'm the royal and I get to do what I want and no one says no to me, is my guess.
This is the crux of the issue, I think. I think this is the old guard versus the new guard. What we're talking about is Prince Harry's resigned. It must be said, Prince Caesar of Lesotho, who founded it with him, he's resigned, and the Board of Trustees. But they're very much the old boys network. The Board of Trustees is very much Prince Harry's set. And contrast that with those who haven't resigned. The executive committee who actually run Sentebale and the 500 employees. And you've got this high-flying woman coming in who does things on an international global scale, is not tied to all the traditions of the of the monarchy, and she wants to take it into a new direction, expanding it beyond Lesotho and Botswana, saying, look, HIV and AIDS are no longer death sentences. There are other issues we can also focus on. And I think very much it was that dynamism coming in, shaking things up, that has caused this schism.
That said, reading some of the things that she said, one of the things that she was very keen on was, as you say, tackling other issues rather than just climate change things, rather than HIV and AIDS and children, but the impact of climate change and various other and equality and wealth and equality. She was kind of going down a very woke, and she was talking about Black Lives Matters, a very woke path, which an awful lot of charities do, because of course, it's climate change, you can get more money for that, you get more money if it's Black Lives Matters linked and things like that. She was going down a very woke path, which I would argue would take away from the work they're doing to actually help actual children actually living with HIV and AIDS.
But I would also say that I'm surprised that this doesn't go right in, squarely at the centre of what the Sussexes are all about. Yes. Health, wealth, and climate change. These are all issues close to them. And what I found most interesting, of course, is that she has accused, and this is a bit difficult to believe, the Sussexes of harassment, bullying, misogyny, and misogynoir. Now, misogynoir was a new term to me, and it means misogyny against black women. Now, that's precisely the sort of term you would have expected Meghan to have come up with in her own
I bet she's gutted she didn't have that for the Oprah interview. Absolutely gutted. I have to say, misogyny, my worry was going to be some rather strange sort of sexual predilection, because these things often are. Who do you think is going to win this one in the end?
Well, the Charity Commission is now looking into this. Look, this woman is a high-flying lawyer. She knows the law. She knows finance. If she felt that she could launch a lawsuit against the charity, she must have some firm ground on which she's standing.
Yep.
So the jury remains open on this.
Absolutely fascinating. Really good to talk to you, Rafa Hadel-Mancu, royal commentator. Just to bring the breaking news regarding Marine Le Pen, leader of the National Rally, the right-wing party, biggest party in the last parliamentary elections in France, set to be running in the next presidential election in 2027. Well, she has been found guilty a couple of hours ago in a French court of embezzlement when she was of MEP funds in the European Parliament. We now have had the full sentence handed down. She has been sentenced to a 4-year jail term and barred from running for public office at any level for 5 years. That means that she would be barred from running for the next presidential election in France. This is going to be huge upheaval in French politics. Is this a bit more Trump-style lawfare going on in French politics? We'll talk about that up next. Love to hear your calls on this. 0344 499 1000. Your thoughts on all the stories we've talked about today, including, of course, Keir Starmer's International Border Security Summit to smash the smuggling gangs, which never seems to smash the smuggling gangs. Do you think it will work this time, though? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. This is Talk.
Yes. You know,
This is Talk, the home of common sense. With me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 11:54 is the time. Sam Armstrong's still with me. Just to reiterate that breaking news in the last few moments about Marine Le Pen, leader of the National Rally in France. Of course, she has been, a couple of hours ago, convicted of embezzlement of funds when she was an MEP, along with a number of her other party officials and elected members. She's just had sentence handed down. She has been banned from standing for the next 5 years. It will ban her from standing in the next presidential election. She was in the runoff against Macron twice. The next presidential election is in 2 years' time. She's also been given a suspended sentence, 4 years in prison, suspended for 2 years. With an electronic bracelet, basically going to be tagged, and a €100,000 fine. Sam Armstrong, look, we talked a little bit earlier, the equivalent, of lawfare being used against Donald Trump to prevent him from standing, although the US Constitution, it was supposed to sort of, people, the independents would go, well, I'm not going to vote for him, he's been convicted of, the numerous different, there was the civil trials, there was the numerous trials regarding, pretty much anything and everything. There were 4 ongoing. They've all gone by the wayside with his re-election. But there was nothing that would have constitutionally prevented him from actually standing for the election, or indeed even being president if he'd been convicted and been behind bars extraordinarily. In France, though, this is a ban on her standing at the next election. Obviously, there will be an appeal, but this is the equivalent, really, of an sort of an expenses claim against Nigel Farage when he was an MEP, and then him being banned from standing for public office at the next election. That's the equivalent, is it not? How significant is this?
The woke playbook is, I'm afraid, becoming clear. If you can't beat them, ban them. They will increasingly turn to the law, and we will see, mark my words, much, much more of this to come. And I'll tell you for why, because the whole fabric, this whole mesh of delusion, of lies that they've managed to put over us, in which they've said, immigration's not a problem, or whichever topic, it's just falling apart because the rubber has run out. The road has run out on them. People can see it with their own eyes. So time and time again, you're going to see this. I regret that I've reached a point where a French court verdict has come in, and actually, having not seen the evidence, I find myself thinking very clearly this has probably been done to stop her running for president. That shows just how sad, how Europe has fallen.
There is absolute widespread corruption in the European Union of all the funds they hand out, the MEPs' expenses. This involves some €3 million, £2.5 million of European Parliament funds, which was, and again, we're not talking about them pocketing it themselves, but basically diverting funds from the European Parliament funds to pay French-based staff, so French political staff. This is between 2004 and 2016, handed guilty verdicts to 8 other and current former members of Le Pen's party who, like her, had served as MEPs. The interesting thing is whether, of course, if they appeal, whether they win that appeal or not. But let's go very quickly to the phone lines. Claire is in the Wirral. Claire, your reaction to this news on Marine Le Pen?
Hi, Julia.
Hey.
Good to talk.
Good to talk to you.
I'm absolutely up in arms, and I agree totally with what Sam said. It's a stitch-up. Yeah. And, it's a left-wing thing that's gone on. I know, I listen to you a lot. I know that you feel that Trump, that it wasn't a stitch-up with Trump.
I think the timing of it was. No, they didn't charge him with these things, in the first couple of years. Only when he said he was running again that they charged him.
Exactly.
So it was politically motivated.
Yeah, by the left. And basically this is what's happened with Marie Le Pen. There's corruption everywhere. Yeah. And unfortunately, what I'm afraid of is that with Nigel Farage, I just think we are stuck now. We are stuck with this far left radical regime where establishment, whether it's a judiciary, the Home Office, whatever, our government, too, yep. and the last government. And we really are stuck, and we're not going to be able to move. If Nigel wants to have an election, the same thing's going to happen to Nigel Farage.
You think ahead of a general election?
Yeah, just as our local elections.
Okay, we can't talk about local elections. We're very limited on that because we're in this sort of purdah period. So have to leave that aside.
Well,
all major parties minor parties and independents are running for local elections.
I'm sorry about that.
No, I'm just playing safe on that front.
But
you think they'll come up with something ahead of a general election?
Oh, definitely. Definitely they will. You know, they'll put something onto him, and we're just not going to move on, Julia.
Yeah. I mean, there is
We're
another
not
figure. I mean,
gonna
certainly
move on.
in France, there is, this Jordan Bardella figure who's leading the French National Rally in the Parliament, in the French Parliament. Very popular figure. And again, child of immigrant parents himself. He'd be an absolutely fascinating, not tainted with the Marine Le Pen, the former National Front leadership. So it would be interesting if he ran instead, if they don't get this change. But yeah, I have to say I'm with you as well. It feels like a stitch up to me. Really appreciate your call, Claire. Thank you very much. I promise, Georgina, I've been desperate to get to you. I promise we'll try and get to you in the next half hour. Lots more calls coming in about, well, are we smashing the gangs? We know we're not. That's all coming up. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Sam Armstrong is still with me. Up next, we are going to be talking more about all of these big topics. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Very much appreciate you joining me today. Lots to talk about, and whether you are listening on DAB+ radio, listening on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube, or watching on your connected device, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Also joining us, I'd like to say, is commentator Sam Armstrong, with me for the full 3 hours of the show, with you live until 1 o'clock. The breaking news we had in the last few moments, after about 2 hours ago, we had the conviction on embezzlement charges of Marine Le Pen and various other members of her National Rally, former MEPs, for conviction for embezzling European Parliament funds to basically fund their French political offices. We're not talking about people sort of spending it on handbags, but spending it on staff in their political party back in France. Marine Le Pen has now been handed her full sentence. She has been banned from standing at for the next 5 years, a 5-year ban from political office. That includes, of course, the next presidential election, when she was expected to stand in 2027. And given her last two elections, running against Emmanuel Macron, who is not going to be standing in 2027, very, very likely, perfectly likely to actually win the French presidency. She's also been sentenced to 4 years in prison. Now, 2 of those 4 years, she will be tagged. She'll also face a €100,000 fine. She may well, we're not quite sure yet whether she'll spend any of that time actually behind bars. But we're talking about the leader of the biggest political party at the last national parliamentary elections in France being banned from standing for public office, for the presidency crucially, but also being sentenced to prison. An extraordinary case. Is this a stitch-up? Is this lawfare, as we saw against Donald Trump by Democrat-led not just attorneys general, but also, of course, local law officials? It's very much a politicised justice system in America. Is this something, as some might think, that could happen to Nigel Farage? Facing some sort of Trump-style charges against him of some sort, and then facing bar from office ahead of the next election? Love to hear your thoughts on all of this. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text us the word talk, then your message to 87222. Get in touch on X at Talk TV. Don't forget the calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. What will the reaction be from supporters, many of them much younger supporters and other political parties in France, to that? Of course, one of the big issues that has meant that Marine Le Pen's National Rally Party has done so well in recent years is the problem of not just legal migration on a mass scale to France and many other countries in Europe, but also illegal migration. And of course, we bear the brunt of a lot of that as well when they head over the Channel. Well, Keir Starmer this morning has been hosting representatives of more than 40 countries in London for a border security summit. He's pledged to lead a global crackdown on illegal immigration, urging nations to unite behind a new approach, he says, to, that old word again, smash the smuggling gangs, greater intelligence sharing. Of course, this all comes as we've seen record levels of Channel migrants through the first 3 months of this year. We have actually seen more migrants coming over on Channel boats than we saw in the 3 months last year, the year before that. So how's that smash of the gangs going? Love to hear your thoughts on whether his global crackdown is what will work. I don't think it will. Plus two-tier justice. Ethnic minority criminal suspects are being given priority for bail by judges. This under new tier justice guidelines drawn up by the Ministry of Justice, the elected representatives of this country. This comes, though, as the Justice Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, plans to change the law to override two-tier justice guidelines drawn up by the independent Quango, the Sentencing Council. Those are due to come into force tomorrow, and they would see lower sentences for ethnic and religious minorities and people claiming to be trans. Yeah, we really do have two-tier justice in this country. Also, from Tuesday, families are going to have to tighten their belts as they're hit by a whole raft of hikes in household bills. Energy bills, water bills, council tax, telecom bills are all rising in April. And it's been revealed that a toddler, a 3 or 4-year-old toddler, was kicked out of nursery after being accused of, guess what, transphobia. The child was suspended for abuse against sexual orientation and gender identity. I imagine the child just simply said that a man and a woman were different, which I think would be a fair thing for a child to say. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that. Do get in touch on anything we're talking about. 0344 499 1000. Sam Armstrong, I mean, just coming back to Marine Le Pen, banned from standing at the next election. The implications of what happened with Trump, the implications of what happened in France, implications for what happens here. We know that the mainstream parties are very, very, very keen to not cede any power, not cede in the polls to some of the parties coming up on the right. Now, they, calling everybody far right and bigoted hasn't worked so far. It didn't work with the National Rally in France. It hasn't worked with the AFD in Germany, even though the other mainstream parties, the equivalent of the Tories and Labour, SPD and the CDU, have refused to work with the AFD, who came a very close second to the CDU. We've seen what happened with Giorgia Meloni in Italy. We just had a tweet, by the way, from Viktor Orban of Hungary saying, "Je suis Marine," solidarity there. But as much as the mainstream parties are desperate for these right-wing parties to go away, their support is growing day by day, is it not?
And it is for the basic fundamental reason, which is that working people, and it is particularly working people, increasingly young people, are seeing the consequences of the decades of cosy consensus over the policies that govern us, that are doing our countries down. They are seeing the cost of net zero. They are seeing the cost of gender madness. They are seeing the cost of mass migration. They are seeing the cost of the kind of economic structures that we've had for the last 20, 30 years. And they are turning to those that are offering, as they see them, real solutions. And what is the left's response to this? Is it to adjust their proposals, to reflect on the new realities and to come up with popular policies of their own? No. It is to try and cheat the system. It is to rig it. It is to try and say, no, we're going to ban you from doing this, or we're going to fix the boundaries so you can't stand, or we're going to change the eligibility, or in Germany, we're going to form a coalition between right and left in order to keep the AfD out. Or, as we are now seeing increasingly so, and it is happening all over the world, we are going to turn to the courts. We're going to try and bring up these minor charges, these technical points against politicians.
I mean, embezzlement's not a minor charge. But my guess is there's an awful lot of people, MEPs, you could charge with embezzlement on this basis.
Well, and we are talking about miscategorisation between one form of political spending and another.
Yeah.
With Donald Trump, we saw things that were whipped. I mean, some of the charges were serious. Others were frankly puerile. Some, in my view, were plain old unconstitutional.
But also, virtually every former president, for instance, the papers they found in Mar-a-Lago, which he shouldn't have had, well, virtually every other ex-president had them now. He refused to give them back when he was asked to. But even so, these charges have been brought against former president before. Do you think that this could happen here?
Yes, I do. But here is what I think is crucially happening, which is that I think the left turned to this because they thought people would be shocked. They thought the idea that a president being convicted of a crime meant that people would never vote for them. Yeah. What Donald Trump proves is people are just too cynical now. People can see through it. They've cottoned on to what's going on. And I just don't think it's working for the left anymore like they hoped it would.
I completely agree with you on that. I really do. Look, so much more to talk about. We'll talk about MPs' expenses for their cockapoos, for goodness sake, with Mark Littlewood coming up very soon. First up, though, let's talk to Hajab Singh Bangal. He's a UK immigration lawyer, a friend of the show. A very good afternoon to you, Hajab.
Good afternoon, Julia.
Thank you for joining us. And of course, one of the big issues that has been a massive issue in French politics for the last few years, and has seen that growth from Marine Le Pen, is one of the biggest issues for us in this country. No wonder. Tories promised to tackle the problem of illegal immigration. They were going to, quote, stop the boats under Rishi Sunak. Then we had smashing the gangs from Keir Starmer. He's been hosting an international border security summit today. Some representatives of some 40 countries here. Basically, trying is not just looking at having dealings with France or the EU, but going back across the world to where the people are actually coming from, trying to talk about all the different things they can do to try and stop the gangs. Do you have any expectation that any of this will remotely work?
We'll have to wait and see. I mean, well, we know so far that Labour, when they came into power, they were tasked with three things. One was bringing the number of visas granted down, which they've managed to do. Two was sending the number of people back going up, which they've managed to do. And the third, which is a thorn in the side, is stop the boats and stop the channel crossings, which they haven't managed to do.
They've got up.
And that still remains a thorn in the side. So you can see now the policy is all geared to and concentrated on getting these channel crossings down. And this is ultimately what this government, I feel, will be judged on at the next election, and what they're going to be judged on a yearly basis. Immigration, it isn't just a countrywide issue, Julia, and you alluded to this. It's a worldwide issue, from America to Canada, to Asia, to Europe, and now. But what we're seeing now is, with the rise of nationalist parties and parties who are anti-immigration, there's a threat to parties in power and governments, and they need to get that vote back. And they realise, we're not going to be able to get it back without cutting immigration down.
No, indeed. But again, we talk about anti-immigration. I mean, again, in this case, we're talking about pro-borders, pro-law. I mean, at the end of the day, you're not allowed to just go and live in any other country you darn well feel like it. And we know that there are things that do work, crucially, the pull factors. We know that they were able to deal with, Tony Abbott, when he was Prime Minister of Australia, was able to deal with the issues in Australia by stopping the boats never landing in Australia. You were processed on an island off the coast of Australia, and then you were sent back. The boats virtually stopped within, like a month. They'd seen people dying and got on a horrific scale. That stopped because there was no point coming. We've seen with Donald Trump, for all his failings and faults that people can criticise him for, in his first term, he closed the borders effectively. We've seen a massive, huge number, some 10 million people are thought to have arrived in the United States in the last 4 years under the Biden administration. Come on in, the water's lovely, just come on in, it's fine. And then immediately when Donald Trump gets an executive order, that flow has massively fallen. If countries take this seriously, if they make it harder to get in and make it impossible to stay, people don't come. We could do that here.
Well, the fact is, what needs to happen is we need a system to administer all of this, and our Home Office is broken. our machinery is broken. None of this is going to be possible until you fix the machinery.
And when you
can
say
dream of
fix
an
it, do you mean literally sacking everybody at the Home Office and then starting again?
I think we need to start from scratch. I really do. I think what we're trying to do is paper over all of these walls and paint them over. And we've done this for the past 20 years and it hasn't worked. So doing it again just, is stupidity in my view and is futile. What we need to do is work out a new system. So the removals need to be faster, which is sort of happening now. 23,000, 25,000 removed in about 7-8 months. That's good figures. The Tories never really achieved that.
It's better than the Tories were doing, but it doesn't touch the sides of the number of particularly young men here.
Well, if you're getting 30,000 or 35,000 coming in and you're sending 35, 40, 50,000 back, I think that's a plus. So it's better than what's happening before. The number of visas has come down drastically. So we're talking about hundreds of thousands. So that's a point but that actually, ironically, was just before the election, was policies introduced by the Conservatives, which you wonder, well, why did they just introduce that then? Why haven't they introduced it 12 years ago, 10 years ago, 8 years ago?
Well, yeah, a lot of us are asking that. And it would appear an awful lot of Tory voters who didn't vote for the last election are asking that too. But here's the thing. It's not just the illegal migrants issue. We know it's also the massive number of visas that have been issued and making that Boris wave of legal migrants coming here perfectly legally. But it's absolutely fascinating to see Yvette Cooper, their Home Secretary, pointing out that actually migrants who've overstayed their legal visas account for nearly 40% of all asylum claims. So these are people who turn up, some 40,000 people who turned up as overseas students, as migrant workers or visitors on tourist visas, who as soon as that visa is ended, after maybe a few months or a few years, have gone, oh, it turns out I'm actually an asylum seeker and I can't go home. Those people should automatically be sent home, shouldn't they?
Well, they should be very easy to send home and the claims should be very easy to be dismissed. These are people who have come and got their own passport, applied for a visa at the embassy, been assessed to have savings to come and study or work here, shown they've got very comfortable back home, we've got reasons to study and go back home. Then all of a sudden they haven't turned up at uni or they've been caught working elsewhere, they've been detained and they've claimed asylum. Now, this is a lot of people from India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, also Nigeria, a lot of African companies and South American countries as well.
Why can't they go back to those countries? I mean, people people go backwards and forwards to those countries all the time for who live here legally.
Well, I'll tell you, they're actually never intended to come and study here in the first place or work here properly. So what happens is they use the fact, and once again it comes down to the machinery, Julia, they use the fact that it takes a year to decide an asylum claim, which can be decided in a day. And during that year, while a case is being processed, they can stay in hotels and they can also work. The key is, Julia, that they can work.
Yeah, and then another year for the appeal, and we know how long. And then if you don't like chicken nuggets where you come from, then of course your kid might miss you. Then of course, what a surprise, you get to stay. Harjap Singh Bagal is a UK immigration lawyer. So appreciate you joining us. Thank you very much indeed for that. Sorry for the buzzing. I think I had a phone on. I don't understand phones. Silent or ring, one of the two. I don't understand the buzzy noise. But there we are. Harjap, next time, turn it off. Sam Armstrong, look. I don't know how many more times I can have a conversation on my show about this. This is kind of getting to the point, or listen to another statement from Keir Starmer or Yvette Cooper. Fundamental issue we've got with Labour is, I think, unlike a lot of the Tories who, the Robert Jenricks and others who talk a good game on this, is that I don't think they really think there's a problem with illegal migration. I don't think they really think there's a problem with mass legal migration. The British public absolutely think those two are both a problem. I think the Tories came round to the idea that illegal migration really was going to be an issue. Oh, look, you're out of office. That's probably why. But the legal migration, they've been fully on board. And this is when you get into the Marine Le Pens, the Giorgia Meloni's, the AFD leader, the Nigel Farage here, and I think Nigel Farage is far more to the centre ground than those party leaders, but simply pointing out that this is not something with which the British public are willing to put up anymore. And it's not because we're uniquely horrible and xenophobic and bigoted. No Western nation, whether it's Sweden or Denmark or Germany or Italy or America or, in fact, a lot of people in Canada now as well, they do not think that mass arrivals of people, particularly people from completely alien cultures who don't share our values, they don't think it's a good idea, and they're quite right about that.
Yeah, and it's not that just people have just got to the end of the tether. It's also that the numbers of people we are talking about coming into this country has exploded. We are talking about 1 million people arriving on our shores every single year. This country only has a population of 70 million people.
Not anymore.
If 1 million of whom have only come into your country in the last year, 1 in 70 people have turned up in the last year, you are not a country. You are a passing place at best. And all of these people, they come without a mile of road, without a hospital space, without a school, but they come with their own ideas, their own cultures, their own values, and their own, I'm sorry to say it, problems. And we know that there have been persistent, identifiable issues that come about with particular ethnic groupings, particular cultural backgrounds, when they come into this country, and the values do not correspond or align with ours. And that causes understandable, genuine hurt, tension, problems, issues.
I'm sorry, I think I'm legally required to shout bigot at you right now. I mean, this is the thing. This is the way these things are count.
But I don't care if people shout bigot at me anymore.
No one cares anymore. Everyone's had enough.
Because the damage on the other side has risen to the extent in which this country had a problem of nationwide, industrial-scale child rape for over a decade, and nothing was done about it because people were afraid of being called a bigot. Call me what you want.
I don't
I've
care
had
anymore.
enough.
Yeah, the R word doesn't work. You call fascist, racist, bigot. No one cares anymore. They've reached it's almost a badge of honour, which is a terrible thing because those three things are terrible things. But when you throw those words out at people meaninglessly, that's what you do with those words. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of this. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Going to take a quick break. Up next, going to be talking to Mark Littlewood. He's Director of Popular Conservatism. Get his thoughts on what's happening in French politics with Marine Le Pen being barred from public office for the next 5 years, but also going to be talking to him about MPs' expenses after a Labour MP, she's actually in the government, she's a Labour whip, was able to claim 900 quid of your or my money for rent surcharge for her pet cockapoo. That seems reasonable, doesn't it, when the rest of us are trying to tighten our belts? This is Talk, the home of common sense.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Sam Armstrong still with us. Joining us now, I'd like to say, the Director of Popular Conservatism. That's Mark Littlewood. Very good afternoon to you, Mark.
Hi, Julia.
Hello.
Good to be with you.
Thank you very much for joining us. Now, I wanted to talk to you about MPs' expenses, but let's talk very briefly about MEPs' expenses with Marine Le Pen, the leader of the National Rally in France. She has been convicted of embezzlement of EU MEP funds, basically to fund, along with other MEPs, to fund the French political office of National Rally rather than their MEP work. She has been, as part of her sentence, she has been banned from being able to stand at France's next presidential election 2027, being banned from political office for 5 years. She's also faced a 4-year sentence. 2 years prison sentence is going to be suspended, we now understand, while the other 2 will be spent with electronic tag rather than in custody. So not actually facing time behind bars. Also a €100,000 fine. What do you make of the charges against her, the sentence regarding her standing in public office? We've seen, of course, what happened with lawfare, many viewed as with Donald Trump. Do you think the same could happen here with a figure like, say, Nigel Farage?
Yeah, Julia, I think this is very worrying. I can't really speak to the precise detail of whether she misused funds. Obviously, I haven't had time to read the court judgment in full. I get the gist of it. But whether she's due a fine or a suspended sentence or in custody at home, I guess I'd leave that to the court. What I'm worried about is when courts can prohibit you from running for public office.
Yeah.
That should be a decision entirely for the electorate. Now, I guess if you're successfully charged with embezzlement, a good chunk of the electorate might not look favourably upon your candidature.
Yeah.
So it's likely to hit you politically and electorally. But I think this should be a judgment for the French people, not for the French court.
Well, indeed.
As far as eligibility is concerned.
But it's like MPs who are convicted of a certain level of crime and a certain sentence. I think there's a year behind bars, potentially. We've seen, Mike Amesbury and, the by-election we're going to have there as a result of him being convicted of criminal assault. But, if you're sentenced to above a certain amount in this country, if you're a sitting MP, you then have to face a recall. You can face a recall petition if more than 10% of people in your local constituency say we'd like to have another election. Yeah, you fall as the MP, but you've got every right to stand again yourself. You probably won't be selected by your own party, but you could stand as an independent, for instance. So people are still allowed to stand for office. Someone could be a convicted murderer or rapist or goodness knows what. But if people wanted to elect them for office, that's kind of the choice of the people, isn't it?
I think that's right, Julia, and I think I would also ensure that some sort of parliamentary standards commission can't prohibit you from sitting in Parliament for a particular period of time, thereby triggering a recall. You're quite right with regard to Mike Amesbury. He could seek re-election if he wants. I mean, I guess his chances would be somewhere between thin and zero, but nevertheless, it would ultimately be up to the electorate. So you've got in Marine Le Pen somebody who, I'm not quite sure if she's the odds-on favourite, but considered to have a fairly good chance of winning the French presidential election. As I say, I dare say this judgment, you would expect, all things equal, would knock her back in the polls. But nevertheless, in my view, her name should go forward. And you mentioned possibilities in the UK that could be similar to this, Julia, but we also saw this in the USA.
Yeah.
That the principal campaign against Donald Trump was to try to prohibit him from actually getting on the ballot paper, not to defeat him in an election. So we've got to get back, I think, right across the Western world to the true concept of democracy, which is put your name forward and let the people decide, not the judges.
I think the people largely get it right, actually. If you look at all the elections in this country and elsewhere, I think if you actually look at the choices available, they largely, the wisdom of crowds does work a lot of the time, doesn't it? Not most of the time. Let's talk about where the authorities should get involved, though, because the House of Commons has been told by government ministers that it should change its what they call absurd rules, letting MPs claim expenses for their pets. This is after the Labour MP for Coventry North West, who was actually a Labour whip, Taiwo Obatemi, she claimed £900 on her IPSO expenses as an MP, which was approved. It wasn't actually, she didn't put it in for the duck house and it got disallowed as pet rent for her cockapoo Bella. Now, apparently this is a surcharge. This is apparently quite often. It's a long time since I rented, but the landlord basically charges for having a pet stay at her second home in London. That charge is passed on to the taxpayer. But, I mean, quite apart from that, I mean, the fact that it costs you quite a lot. On Cockapoos, thousands to purchase. I'm pretty sure these pedigree dogs sell for absolute thousands as puppies. That I think most people who are worrying about, and we're going to be talking about this next, you know, their bills going up, their council tax going up, you know, and paying all these extra bills coming in tomorrow or April the 6th, that actually having to pay the extra pet rent for this cockapoo for an MP, well, might feel, should we say, a little unfair?
Yeah, you're right, Julia. I mean, this one does seem pretty egregious, doesn't it? I think the problem we've still got with MPs' expenses is it's very unclear what we would consider to be on the right side of the line and the wrong side of the line. I guess your pet seems to be on the wrong side of the line. Well, we'd probably accept that an MP needs to have, I don't know, broadband in their London apartment. Should we pay for that? Does it need to be super fast broadband? We'd probably accept they need a television set. Does it need to be a 4D top-end television set? I think we've got to, you know, if they've got kids, can they have a bigger apartment so their kids can stay over in London? All of this is very vague. We'd be much better to move to a system whereby MPs have, if you like, a London allowance for each night they need to be there, and kind of what they spend it on is up to them, whether they stay in a hotel or buy themselves an apartment, but you give them, I don't know, £300 a night for sake of argument, and they disperse that as they see fit.
But we have had the ridiculous situation.
There are people always returning to this.
Yeah, there are people who after the expenses scandal in 2008, MPs who already own a second home in London. They've got a home, or they live in London. They've got a second home in their constituency. Of course, they swap over which is a second home or not, depending on whether they're selling it and want to avoid capital gains tax, or whether they're furbishing it and they want the taxpayer to pay. Then they just kind of swap it around. But we did see the situation where, because they were told, well, you can no longer buy a flat, buy a second home, and then pay the mortgage on the taxpayer, and then make, you know, sometimes a couple of £100,000 in profit when you sell the flat, when you leave office, you can only pay rent. So you've got the absurd situation of people who own a second flat in London and another MP, and they swap over and they both rent each other's flats because they can get rent for it, but they can't get the mortgage for it. It doesn't work. This system doesn't work.
No, you're quite right, Julia. And of course, in any system, it always gets gamed. That's a very complex way of gaming the system. But guess what? MPs have worked it out. So I would have thought it'd be much better to move to the sort of system that many companies operate on. That if we send you away on business, you get X amount for your food and drink and Y amount for a hotel. And where you stay and what you eat and what you drink is up to you. There's your slice of money. And if you don't spend it all, you can keep the rest. So you work out a fair subsistence allowance for having to stay overnight in London whilst Parliament is in session. You give every MP that, and whether they stay in a hotel, in an Airbnb, put that to buying a house or sleep under Waterloo Bridge should be a matter for them.
That's a very good point. I rather like that. Mark Littlewood, thank you very much indeed for joining us at 12:32 is the time. Sam Armstrong, your thoughts? Because I think, I mean, the expenses scandal, I mean, we saw a lot of, I mean, people lost their jobs. People were ousted, you know, weren't able to stand again as MPs, and quite rightly, the outrage over this. And they were taking the mick, frankly. But it was because, you basically, the nod and the wink was, we can't give you a pay rise because everyone gets upset about that. So we're going to give you, you know, £23,000 in expensive second home. But we've now got to the other extreme where people think it's outrageous they've got a second home. They have to live in two different places. That's part of the job. If you want people to run to be an MP, unless you only want rich people to run to be MPs, so they have to be an ex-banker, then I'm afraid you're going to need to provide accommodation. I think it's reasonable. We don't expect our officials, our elected officials, to be living in a Airbnb and be somewhere different every week. I've got no issue with them having a second home. I just think we need to get this onto a sensible footing about what they can and cannot purchase. I like the fact, though, that now, since 2010 or so, they've actually had to provide a receipt like the rest of us.
Yeah, and I do think there is an issue, which is, though, that the system is guarding MPs, protecting MPs from the same pressures that all of us are facing, right? Because of the policy decisions that this Labour government has taken, pensioners went cold this winter, right? They just did.
Yeah.
Energy prices went up. They didn't give them the winter fuel allowance. But MPs, they all get their gas bill paid for.
For their second home.
For their second
home.
But some of them, Julia, I hate to tell you, game the system. So what is their second home?
But hold on a minute. No. But no benefit claimants do that. Because we know they don't do that. But why would MPs do that? By the way, if you've not got the sarcasm font there was sarcasm there.
But here is the thing, Julia. I do think that, when we live in a world in which pensioners went cold this winter, but an MP was able to claim extra money for their cockapoo, it is a crock-a-doo-doo, to put too fine a point on it. It's wrong, and I can understand why people are rightly upset when they read this kind of news.
And also, you're on your 900k a year. No, 900, one time 90k. 90k. I said, where I got the 900 from. Some 90k a year. You can probably afford to pay the extra surcharge for your
If you can
dog.
afford to design a dog.
A dog isn't a necessity. Yeah, honestly, cockapoos are thousands.
Look, they're the little fluffy.
Get yourself a nice, clever.
This isn't a working class dog.
Clever
It really isn't.
dog. Get a good, nice mongrel. Nice mongrel. They're much cleverer and they live longer. They're healthier. Honestly, although I think the thing about cockatoos is they are very happy dogs and they don't shed on the sofa. I think that's the key. But there we are. But I bet you she sends in cleaning bills for the.
Yes.
Bet we get those even so. But anyway, 12:34 is the time. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. We will get to some of your calls. Up next, going to be talking about how many families will be, unless you own a cockapoo and the state is paying for it, having to tighten your purses. All the bills that are going to be going up in the next few days. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good afternoon to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Promised to get some of your calls coming in, not just about Marine Le Pen, but also, of course, this migrant summit, smash the gangs like we've been doing for the last few years so successfully when it comes to channel migrants. Right now, though, let's talk about, the stuff that is really going to be hitting us in our pockets coming up as of April the 1st, tomorrow. Ain't going to be April Fool's Day. It's going to be April Tax Day. Your water bill is going to likely to go up by an average of 26%, so up by a quarter. Your energy bill up by 6.4%, but given the energy bill is already so high, you're looking at $1,500, $2,000. Mobile and broadband going up by the same, about 6.4%. Council tax up by 5%. TV licence up by 2.9%. Road tax up to about 4% plus. So basically, all your bills are going up, and it all adds up. Let's talk to Warwick Lightfoot. He's an economist and former Conservative special advisor. Very good afternoon to you, Warwick.
Afternoon, nice to see you.
Thank you for joining us. This is the thing, lovely spring weather, we're all feeling good. Joys of spring, going to have lovely lighter evenings after the clock's changed. But actually, it's going to be a really dark month for an awful lot of people when it comes to the bills rolling in.
Well, that's right. I mean, a lot of bills go up in April, and of course, we all get a bit of a holiday off paying the council tax. So I think if I remember rightly, there's about 2 months when it doesn't get collected. So you have this rather nice feeling at the fag end of the financial year, and you think, oh, I've got a bit more money than I thought, and then you brace yourself.
And then it hits, yes. And then it hits. Yeah, I got my council tax bill ready for April, and it was like, wow, how much? Oh, you're going to collect the bins now, are you? That's good to know. But of course, businesses are also going to see even more bills go up on the 6th of April. So that's, I think, next Sunday. And of course, the problem they're going to be facing, of course, is crucially the changes to national insurance. But that's also going to have an impact on people on PAYE, isn't it?
Well, the businesses actually face the national insurance, but many of them also face the minimum wage and the national insurance in combination with the minimum wage. And it's not an accident. This is today's FT, and it's the big thing. Lower paid will take the hit, and raking the whole coals on that. And my own view is, I think this is big potatoes. The worst tax you can levy in terms of so-called deadweight cost is national insurance, payroll and security tax. And the other thing is, I think we're all underestimating the impact on the efficiency of the labour market of the rising minimum wage.
Oh, that's very interesting, because here's the thing. If you're on the minimum wage, I know my daughter and her mates, 18, doing their odd jobs on the Saturdays, they're all thrilled about the minimum wage going up. But the reality is that alongside the national insurance hike, we're looking, that's a 26k hike on businesses, particularly, actually it's happening and affecting and hitting big businesses as well as small businesses as well. But the crucial thing there is that it's not just the rate going up for employers, it's also the threshold starting at 5,000, so much lower. So many more of their lower paid workers are going to get that. So although the minimum wage might go up for people, it might actually be the case that they stick people on minimum wage not rising it, or they let people go, or they hire fewer people, as you say.
Or change the hours.
But yeah, people at the bottom who are going to be hit the hardest.
You've put your finger on why the minimum wage is not an efficient way of dealing with poverty. Many people are on the minimum wage who are satellites of households that would normally not be scored as living in poverty. And your example there is a very, very neat one of why it's not a good way of tackling poverty.
So you're saying because a lot of those people are not sort of the key earners. Here's the thing that I think that a business, I think if you can't pay someone a reasonable wage where they can actually, afford some basics when you're at the minimum wage, I don't think you're running a very good business.
I understand that feeling. I think in the end, it's probably better for people to sort out themselves what they want to do. And the big difficulty is the minimum wage. Many of us worried that it would cause unemployment. It's not caused unemployment because what it's done is hold down all the wages further up. So there's been a compression, pay differentials, and I think there's something going on now. You've got incentives damaged by child benefit taken away at 60%, the allowance is going at £100,000 at 60%, and at the bottom, the minimum wage interfering with and you might not. This may give us a clue as to why we've had such disappointing productivity in the last 10 years.
Yeah. Plus, also, we know, and it ties in with the other big story we're talking about today with the illegal migration. We've got an awful lot of people in this country undercutting things like the minimum wage because they don't need to be paid it, because they can't go to the authorities if they're not paid it, because they're not here working legally.
I'm sure there's that dimension to the labour market, I'm sure.
In terms of how much poorer people are going to feel, a lot of people will be saying, I'm only just making it through now. Certainly even because I know that the media are very obsessed with water bills going up by a fortune, or by a quarter on average, much higher for some areas. But again, your water bills are much lower overall than they are your energy bills. And people have seen the energy bills go up and up and up. OK, they're not sort of spiralling up exponentially anymore, but they are still a massive, massive hit on many families at a time when people have probably used up all their savings dealing with the last couple of years. So these things, council tax things, like for some families it's just, well, we need to be a bit more careful. OK, we'll stop buying our latte in the morning. But for an awful lot of families, this will be hitting them at breaking point.
Oh, absolutely. But, for lower income families that don't, particularly those who are just above any threshold of getting any state assistance, I think this is very difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much indeed. Really appreciate you joining us on that. Warwick Lightfoot, economist and former Conservative Special Advisor. Interesting, Sam Armstrong, this idea that actually the minimum wage, which is the one good thing for people on low incomes, might actually be creating more of a problem.
Yeah, well, it's definitely a huge factor. And increasingly you look at the minimum wage and you think, how much would I earn on the minimum wage compared to what average workers are now earning, and that gap has got very, very small. The trouble is, this country's just got expensive for everyone.
Yeah.
And tomorrow is just, I actually just think tomorrow is going to be one of the worst days in recent memories. What have you got coming in? You've got higher bills, you've got more taxes, and you've got a new justice system that, if you look like me, means you're going to be going to prison for longer than you do.
The
you
fascinating
would do if you
thing
would
is,
otherwise.
all those Labour MPs who've been bleating on about cuts to welfare reform, even though we're still talking about more people claiming benefits, just trying to cut the rate of increase, exponential levels of growth, clearly out of kilter with any other Western country. Clearly there are people swinging their head, people who could easily work, who are not working. And at the same time, you just hear so little from those same Labour MPs about the people who are in work, doing the right thing, a lot of them on very low incomes, doing the best they can to make ends meet and pay for themselves and their families, you know, having some self-respect. Obviously, I'm not saying, look, if people need benefits, absolutely we should be there for them, but a lot of people who don't need them, who are getting them. And I just think, you know, it's just complete silence from those Labour MPs on that issue. Let's go to some calls quickly. I want to go to Georgina, who's on the line in London about migration. Georgina, you've been very kindly waiting on the line. Great to talk to you, but talking about, you know, all these issues. But again, it's all tied up, isn't it? The economy and migration.
Well, I've totally lost faith in Keir Starmer's weak efforts at stopping the migrant crisis. He's been weighed, measured and been found wanting by the British public. This government has shown incompetence on a biblical scale regarding this problem and have done nothing to remedy it, at the detriment of our country and its inhabitants. Honestly, I wouldn't leave them in charge of a houseplant. We need to stop, with immediate effect, any incentive for these illegal migrants to come to the UK. Other countries have done it, Julia, and these strategies have worked.
Well,
we need to take off the millstone around our necks called the ECHR. We need to stop sending ridiculous amounts of money to France to stop illegal immigrants coming over to the UK. France are lining their pockets with our money, not watching our backs.
Absolutely.
France, you know, it's not working. That money can be used to fund our own specialist border defence unit.
Yeah, but again, I mean, again, people are going to arrive. We just ship them back straight away. And if if you get into this country, absolutely, you'd be rounded up straight out of the country. Or I'm afraid we're going to have some sort of internment camps or something to move them out and say, well, these are the options. You're not going to be walking the streets. Just not going to happen anymore. We're never going to deal with this if we don't tackle the pull factors instead of just the push factors. Georgina, speaking a lot of sense. Thank you very much indeed. Let's go to Simon, who's on the line. He's called up on 0344 499 1000. Simon, he's in Basingstoke. Simon, you want to talk about the conviction and the sentencing of Marine Le Pen. If people are just tuning in, a National Rally leader set to run against whoever the candidate is against her in the 2027 presidential election. She's been convicted of embezzlement. She's got a suspended 4-year sentence for prison, but also a 5-year ban on standing for public office. Simon, what do you make of that?
I think this is an incredibly dangerous thing to do, and I think you when you were talking earlier about the incoming rises, this is all part of the same picture.
Yeah.
We saw this happen before in the Middle East. Prior to the Arab Spring, you had over a decade of economic stagnation, corruption, elites ignoring their people. And what did you see? You didn't see there was no organised revolution. What you saw is just immense public protests, which eventually overturned governments, like in Egypt, and led to a civil war in Syria. And I think we are coming close to the point where we will see the same in Europe.
Yeah, I don't think, again, people trying to change to look like, people trying to change the system with voting for Brexit in 2016, voting to get Brexit done in 2019. People in Britain, using their vote, not pitchforks on the street. Same in France, again, using their vote, going down the democratic route, and the AfD, the Marine Le Pen, being blocked at every turn, no matter what they do. When they've given up on the authorities, go, well, let's try lawfare. Again, I'm with you. I don't think this ends well.
It doesn't end well, and there's another example of this: the Polish People's Party, which was removed from power, and now Donald Tusk is the Prime Minister. You had an electoral alliance of the equivalent of the Socialist Worker Party in the UK to the Conservatives, all to remove him from power. You literally had all the other parties against his party, their party.
Absolutely.
If you stop democracy from working, then eventually voters will decide that if democracy's not working, something else has to be tried.
Absolutely.
And I think we're close to that in the UK, and I'd say France is even worse.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think they do not realise they are absolutely playing with fire here. Simon and Basildon, thank you so much. 12:48 is the time. I'm going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be talking about... And you'd think I was joking. You'd think it was April the 1st, which is tomorrow. But no, it's a serious story. A toddler was thrown out of nursery for being transphobic. Deep sighs, everyone. That's up next. This is Talk.
Emergency legislation. He hasn't. There's now no chance whatsoever that by the end of today she will stop these new guidelines into force. And so from tomorrow morning, 15 hours time, you're going to have people going to court.
The UK. On your smart speaker.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 12:51 is the time. Just a couple of moments, David Bull will be here. He's standing in for Ian Collins all week. We'll find out what's happening on his show. Right now, let's talk about a story which I really should be on tomorrow because it's April the 1st. April Fool's Day tomorrow, you know, when all our bills go up, and we're supposed to all find that funny. But this story is so laughable, so ridiculous, it should be April the 1st. Except, of course, I don't think these stories shock us anymore. A toddler, aged either 3 or 4, was suspended and kicked out of nursery after being accused, wait for it, of transphobia. This is absolutely extraordinary. This is data from the Department for Education showing that the child was suspended for abuse against sexual orientation and gender identity. This took place sometime in the 2022-2023 academic year at a state school, and statistics indicate that 94 pupils at similar primary institutions were suspended or permanently excluded for transphobia or homophobia in the same year. It includes 10 pupils from year 1, so you talk about 5-6-year-olds, 3 from year 2, and 1 child of nursery age. Let's talk about this with Joe Bartos, who's an assistant editor at The Critic. Joe, thank you for joining us, but oh my God, what is going on? I mean, we don't know what this child said or did, but let's face it, given the madness of this trans ideology in many of our places of supposedly of learning, simply saying no that's a man and that's a woman, and refusing to play along with someone claiming to be a woman who clearly is a man, that would count as transphobic now, wouldn't it?
Yeah, of course it would. I mean, in a way, I sort of love stories like this because they really show the madness of transgenderism for what it is.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a reason that in the story of The Emperor's New Clothes, it's a child who points and says, no, that's, the Emperor's in fact naked. And I think it's exactly the same thing that we can see happening here. The brilliant thing about kids is they will sometimes tell the unvarnished truth. And yeah, it is very likely this was just a kid who said, that's a man or that's a woman, and somebody got offended.
Yeah, and no doubt they were given one of these books which are now completely the norm in primary schools and nursery schools, where they are pushed this idea of 84 different genders and non-binary this, and men can become women, women become men, and pregnant dads and the like, all this stuff, all utter lunacy, all political ideology, and vast majority of people don't agree with it, and everyone's a bit too afraid to say anything, and parents who do speak out end up getting accused of God knows what bigotry and goodness knows what. But when it's schools as well, but again, we're talking about transphobic abuse. I mean, disagreeing with someone. We know, grown adults are losing their jobs in academia, in public sector, private sector, being forced out for saying, no, you're a man, not a woman, you can't come into my changing room, or refusing to accept the political ideology of trans. I mean, it's certainly something I'd be willing to lose my job for. I refuse to be made to pretend to lie, or to pretend to believe something I don't believe. But it is extraordinary that they're imposing this on children. But do you think that most adults, most parents, are gloriously, happily unaware of what children are being taught in school, in primary school, and even in nursery? Because this stuff has taken hold of educational institutes right from the very, very bottom.
Yeah, I don't think most parents do have a clue, and I would really urge anyone to check out their school's curriculum, to have a look at the books that are in the library. It is really concerning. There are a lot of activists out there who are sort of pushing this very aggressively. And what's particularly concerning is it's so destabilising. The idea, telling a child who's just trying to make sense of the world, who's understanding categories, who's learning about sort of, basic biology at that sort of age. Yeah. So to destabilise them by making them lie is really troubling. Yeah. And it sort of opens them up, I think, to abuse, really, because how can they express themselves or talk clearly or think things through if they're shut down?
Yeah, indeed. And again, we use the phrase sort of, Orwellian is like 1984, an awful lot, but this really is, because this is what Winston Smith was forced to do. You had to pretend, that truth was lies, war is peace, that thing that happened in the past that you knew only an hour ago had never happened. And this is what it did, actually, and this was all based on George Orwell and what was happening in the Soviet Union, where people had to genuinely pretend that things weren't as they actually were. And this is incredibly sinister, and it's soul-destroying and psychologically breaking for adults. But for children, this is, let's call it what it is. This is child abuse.
Yeah, it is, and it's dystopian. I often think we're sort of living in a world that's half 1984 and half Brave New World in terms of the way things are going. It's destabilising, it's abusive, and I think the sooner we get this ideology out of schools, the better. Absolutely
to that. Assistant Editor of the Cricket, Joe Bartosh, thank you very much indeed for that. Sam Armstrong, you've done loads of work with the Free Speech Union over the years, and I'm a member, you're a member. This stuff is madness, but this will be a case of a child being actually, officially reprimanded. But we know this is already happening with parents being sort of given a wagging finger, a little note back. But I think, again, most people are totally unaware, or they think it's terribly innocent when their children are being taught this stuff at school. It's not innocent. It's incredibly, incredibly sinister. And the parents who are aware of it, they're the lucky ones, because most of them aren't.
He's a sinister activist attempting to force a world view upon everyone. Yep. And dissent will not be tolerated. If you're an adult, it'll be the police coming round. But they have reached the point now where they're not even prepared to let a four-year-old dissent from their hideous, heinous, dangerous worldview that they're in.
It is dangerous. But again, we allowed it, didn't we, quite happily, apparently, most parents did. When it comes to climate change, our children have been, absolutely indoctrinated on that. They're indoctrinated about, critical race theory, translogy. Again, parents need to get involved. And, of course, then you find the police will turn up on your door if you're unhappy about what's going on.
Yeah, look, these people will stop at absolutely nothing. Yep. And this is why I just don't think it's enough to kind of meekly say, oh, we need neutrality in schools. Nope. I think we actively have to fight back about all of this. Otherwise, it's just they're going to keep doing it.
I have my criticisms of Donald Trump, but on this one, he is absolutely A1 right. Sam Armstrong, thank you very much. I'm delighted to say David Bull is in the studio, in for Ian Collins for the afternoon.
Yes, lovely to see you. I haven't seen you for ages, actually.
If we do see each other in the studio, we're in the opposite ends of the day.
Yes, indeed. Passing ships in the night.
Yeah, what are you going to be talking about?
So it kind of follows on from that, which is what direction is this country taking? It seems to me that this country is in freefall, that no one seems to be doing anything. We are being governed by a woke government, and there is no sort of strong opposition at all.
No.
So immigration, obviously, it's very important to our viewers and listeners. Keir Starmer got this talking shop of 40 countries. Of course, it is a talking shop, isn't it?
Another one.
Another one.
Another we're pretending to do something.
And we're going to smash the games. Yeah. Well, you're not doing very well, are you? If you've got 6,000...
He should set up a new Quango. I think that would dissolve.
Yes, because that solved everything else,
and
doesn't it?
And what do you make about Marine Le Pen being barred from standing for French presidential